Welcome, everybody, to the newest episode, I don't know what number, of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. I'm your host today, Craig Taylor, joined by my co-host,
Lucas.
And
Matt Davis. Woo!
Yes, and always on the ones and twos, we have Brendan over there. Hello. Masked up with COVID. No. So we are in the new studio.
Welcome.
He was like, please, guys. And we dragged him out of the hospital and we brought him into studio because we were like, the people cannot wait to see who wins between Crazy Horse and Pancho Villa, Brendan. You got to think of the people here.
Right. So even though he had COVID, he came in. We have to record this quick because I got to see my grandma after this. But
make sure when you see her, make sure you're in the will.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So that's
the
plan.
Precaution, you know.
Right.
Yeah, welcome to the new studio, though. It might not always look like this. It might get changed slightly. It might not. But this is probably where we're going to finish out the rest of Deadliest Warrior because we're whittling down the episodes here. And I got to say, this is my fun fact of the day. This is the second, I believe, that was recorded out of Matt's old place. Bonus points if you know what other episode was not recorded at Matt's old place.
I didn't think about that one myself, and I was there.
That's a juicy piece of trivia.
Anyone?
There is a clue in that episode at one point.
Right. Comment if you know.
There is a clue that gives it away. So
should we give a hint of what season it is?
Yeah, you could say
season 1.
I think that's kind of obvious because we're still fumbling around. There's another hint.
Yeah. Okay.
That was back. I went back and rewatched an old episode because I wanted to double check myself before I threw out some fact that I got wrong about ourselves. And I used to introduce myself as Lucas from Green Dice Games, acting like I'm like from some big gaming channel or something. It was my personal channel that had like 5 followers.
Now we've acquired Lucas.
Yeah. No longer.
We bought Lucas out in a hostile takeover.
Right. I listened to myself and I was like, what an asshole.
He's forced to work here to the end of his days.
Right. But yeah, this is the new studio. And yeah, we're
with no decorations yet besides the flag.
Right. You can't see it, but Brandon now has a full desk. We used all that ad money we don't have to buy Brendan a desk, and now he's no longer balancing the soundboard on his on the couch. So.
I will miss looking over at Brendan while he's holding up a light with like headphones on, holding like the mixer in his lap.
Yeah, that was Brendan's natural reading a book. It's his natural position. But yeah, that's.
Let me just say the Dr. Squatch checks just keep clearing, baby.
Right. But that is not why we're here today. We're here to talk about Crazy Horse versus Pancho Villa.
Yeah. The closest I've ever come to a fresh watch, because I guess you can call it a fresh watch, because I don't think I've ever watched this episode in entirety or at all. I didn't even know who won.
Yeah. Well,
we still haven't.
We should probably explain some, because I think this is interesting, because we've sort of joked about this.
Yeah.
This was I guess you'd call a legendarily bad episode among us, at least as kids. Because for some reason, multiple attempts we tried watching this and everybody fell asleep. And to be fair, it wasn't like 10 times, but like 2 or 3 times we all came together to watch this episode and every person fell asleep. So that being said, we've joked about it as like this bad episode, but other people don't view it that way. I think other people just see it as just another episode. I want to ask you guys, with that in mind, how did this episode check out for you?
It's actually pretty exciting.
Yeah.
No, this episode ended up, we always had that joke, so I just kind of assumed it was going to be like a bad episode. But no, I kind of liked this one. It wasn't too bad.
It was weird. I kept going back and forth. In some parts, it reminded me of the Deadliest Warrior season 1. Other times, like, I don't even know. But I don't know.
I think there's a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. With not just like the content. I'm not even talking about the matchup. I'm just talking about like how the entertainment value of the episode. I think there's a little bit of good, a little bit of bad. So I have some thoughts on it. But I don't know if it's the worst episode of the series. Or
Right.
anything
Yeah,
like that.
That was claimed to be.
That was Accident the Great Versatility, which I think is like universal.
Let me define what I said. It was like a decent episode. What I meant by that, I meant it got me heated. I got into my Deadliest Warrior mode. Wasn't the best episode ever, but I got pissed off about things, and that's what the show needs to do for me. So
Right, you
got its job.
You gotta get invested. Well, let's start out with the beginning, gentlemen, before we get into our warriors. So we start out one of the first frames, this show insisting that it does not reflect the views of Crazy Horse or Pancho Villa. And I think I just want to take this opportunity to also make that clear to our viewers. If you thought that any of us endorse the views of Crazy Horse or Pancho Villa, fuck you. We don't denounce them either. So don't even think
I'm
about
actually
that.
a General Custard descendant, so I'm it's personal for me,
Yeah, it's like heritage.
right? It's heritage.
Yeah. So I just want to say we don't disavow them, but we
US
definitely don't.
Never endorsed Pancho Villa. It's not on a record anywhere. Get that out of your mind.
Right.
And neither do we.
Right. So I just want to make that clear. So
Would you mind if I read their intros, Craig?
I was going to say too, I did not write them down because they were too long. So I was hoping you did.
Yeah, I had to pause like 3 or 4 times so my pea brain could like jot it all down. Crazy Horse, the fierce Lakota warrior of the 1870s, whose brilliant battle plans and fearless offenses annihilated General Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn, versus Pancho Villa, the Mexican revolutionary whose guerrilla army destroyed corrupt dictators in the early 20th century and then invaded the United States.
Like Planet of the Apes' is guerrilla army. Sorry, that's where my mind went.
General Custer, though, upstanding fella.
Now, is it General Custer or General Custard?
I don't know. I don't care.
That would be a great name of an ice cream place, General Custard.
The only thing I really know about him is
Yeah.
there was that Nintendo game, like Custer's Revenge or something.
Well, it was an Atari game.
Was it? And it got like banned or something because it's an awful, like terrible game.
You have General Custard and the ice cream place next door, Colonel Cream.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that I always think of that game too.
Didn't it get like legitimately banned or something? Because it's like just like a game that should not have been made.
Well, it's the whole point of the game is you rape a Native American woman against a cactus.
Okay, well there you
And that's
go.
how you get points.
All right, that's I regret bringing that up.
Yeah, it's crazy. Look it up. Anyway, moving on.
Oh,
so
my exposure to Pancho Villa. When I lived in North Carolina, I used to make margaritas with Pancho Villa tequila. It was like $10 a bottle. That's all I know about him.
Nice.
other than he's a champion. No. So let's just get into the warriors themselves, and maybe you guys can get into whether or not those comparisons are apt. We'll start with Pancho Villa. Circa 1914, 36 years old, height of 5'10", and weight of 170 pounds. Lucas, tell us a little bit about Pancho Villa.
I went into this one knowing, like, no jokes aside, absolutely nothing pretty much about Pancho Villa. So I went into it like kind of open-minded, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit long-winded right here because his story is, like, in my opinion, like a Game of Thrones plot. So I was getting pretty into it. So I'm gonna try to read all this without stumbling over my own words.
Are you about to go into Pancho Villa history?
Yeah.
Can I give a couple notes on his intro real quick? They're small, like, funny things I noticed.
Sure.
You're good at small, funny things.
So, in the opening of the episode, we get a shot of Pancho Villa biting an apple and a stock sound effect of a crunch. He's, like, sitting under a tree and he's like...
It's so pronounced.
Yeah.
You'd think that he was like known for apples or something. that they made sure to include that.
And then in the intro to the Fight Club, we can see Dorian poking around a fake plastic skeleton. It has like plastic organs in it. He's like poking it with a stick. I guess we'll get to the rheumatoid arthritis and stuff.
Yeah, that's
I noticed some secret X factors on Robert Daly's computer.
Okay.
So,
this episode I think has a lot of hidden gems, because when we were just rewatching it while we were eating, we found like 5 more things that we didn't notice, and we're like barely paying attention. So a lot of good stuff to get to. But yeah, tell us about Mr. Villa.
Sure, I would love to. So he was born June 5th, 1878. His original birth name was Jose Doroteo Arango Arambula. And Arango coming from his father's side and Arambula coming from his mother's side. He originally went by Arango, but the rumor was in 1903 he killed an army officer, stole his horse, and started going by Francisco Villa. And Pancho was like a common nickname for people named Francisco, so that's where he got his name Pancho Villa from. So I was pretty curious about that.
Yeah, good ring to it, I think.
Others claimed that he appropriated the name from a bandit, Coahuila, who was known as his friends as La Cucaracha, meaning the cockroach. I'm going to butcher like every Spanish word in this, by the way, so just buckle up.
Is that what the song's about, is a cockroach?
I think so. La Cucaracha.
Brendan, look that up.
Yeah, don't feel too insecure, Lucas, because I didn't even put any Native American words on my sheet because I just was like, no, I'm not doing it.
Oh, I loaded up on the Spanish. I took Spanish 3 at university
have
level.
Been through enough. I'm not doing that to their language.
All right, so he went by different names at different points, but Pancho Villa is obviously the most popular one. He grew up in a large estate in Durango, and he claimed that his father was a famous bandit, although there's never been any evidence to support this claim. He quit school to support his mother when his father died, and when Francisco was 16, I think the show covers this, he moved away temporarily, but he came back after the estate owner kind of sexually assaulted his sister, and then he famously, at the age of 16, killed the estate owner. He then stole a horse and fled the scene. This kind of opened him up to the world of violence, and he quickly joined a band of bandits going by the name Arango until he was arrested in 1898 for gun and mule theft. He tried to do some honest work at this point after getting out. He was being a butcher at some point in a neighboring town of Chihuahua, but that was forced out of business. He turned to a life of a bandit again. That's when he killed the army officer and started going by Francisco Villa. So between this period and 1910, he went back and forth between finding honest work, such as being a miner, and committing acts of thievery and stealing horses. He met Abraham Gonzalez, who was a local representative for a presidential candidate, Francisco Madero. Madero opposed the continued rule of the wealthy landowners and convinced Villa that through banditry he could fight for his people and hurt these wealthy landowners. This was also the year 1910 that the Mexican Revolution began, which he had a big impact in. He took up a group of bandits and proceeded to take on federal armies that were mostly employed by these wealthy landowners and even captured some of their estates. Madero then met Villa personally in 1911 and promoted him to colonel within the revolutionary forces. Much of this fighting that was happening was near the U.S. border, and since Madero was a politician, he ordered his troops to stop the siege of the border towns, specifically Juarez. Pancho Villa then ignored this order and attacked and captured the city instead. Madero ended up winning presidency, but was forced to sign a treaty, which essentially kept the same power structure in place, so not much changed. And the Revolutionary Army, which he was a colonel of, was disbanded. And Villa kind of gave Madero this kind of like, way to go, champ, way to go, as he turned his back on all the revolutionary forces. So after many requests from Madero, Villa eventually gave in and served in the federal army, giving Madero many victories. He was named a brigadier general by Victoriano Huerta, but Pancho Villa could care less. This annoyed Huerta, so he sought to discredit Villa by accusing him of stealing a horse. Villa then smacked Huerta in the face, which caused him to order Pancho Villa for execution by firing squad. Pretty badass. Madero stepped in and ordered that he'd be spared and imprisoned instead. Pancho Villa then escaped prison on Christmas Day in 1912, crossing into the United States near El Paso, Texas. And shortly after this, Madero was murdered and Huerta became president. Plot twist. Guess he shouldn't have slapped him. Huerta then killed off a couple of people that were very close with Madero. He kind of was seeking ultimate power. A lot of people thought he wanted to be kind of a dictator. So a new revolutionary force was then founded with Pancho Villa as one of the leaders. And this is where he essentially rose to fame as a public figure. This is where his legend started in 1913 and 1914. This is where he became kind of that Robin Hood figure, but he didn't really give back to the poor so much like Robin Hood did. He was just stealing to essentially regain supplies for his revolutionary forces. He took to train robbing and famously robbed a Wells Fargo train where he took 122 bars of silver and a Wells Fargo employee hostage and forced Wells Fargo to help him sell the bars for cash.
You're talking about the Wells Fargo that I'm paying my student loans to?
Yes, the very same.
Now, bars of silver almost as valuable as bars of Dr. Squatch soap. Guys, I have a great announcement and promotion.
If only.
I did. Okay, not to derail too much. I did start using that soap you got me, Matt, because I didn't want to throw it away and waste it. The chalky milk.
The chocolate milk.
I still have not used the one you gave me either. It smells like Coca-Cola or something, I think.
So does Craig smell like chocolate milk right now?
It smells. No, I use it sparingly because this is kind of gross. When you use it, little bits break off, but they're like diarrhea brown. So it looks like I shat myself in the shower after I use it. So I try to use it sparingly.
I thought you were about to say, like, I only use it when I'm about to go on a date. You know,
I am on one.
I'm only using it when I have diarrhea.
Girl sits down and she's, is that chocolate milk? Oh my God. My dad smelled like chocolate milk before he went to jail.
I'm like, I'm in.
You're in.
I got a crazy one. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yes. Back to the early 1900s. So he had his most spectacular victory, self-proclaimed, at Tierra Blanco, where he was accompanied by American journalists who recorded the battle. So the legend of Pancho Villa kind of took foothold here. He was becoming a brilliant tactician on the battlefield, and he gained a political following and was named governor of Chihuahua, even though he continued to fight battles against Huerta's army. He continued moving south in an attempt to capture the cities like Zacatecas, which really crippled Huerta's federal army. As he moved towards the capital, though, he was halted as his supplies were running low due to the embargo placed on Mexico by the United States. This is because one of Pancho Villa's allies, Carranza, who was a wealthy estate owner and governor of Guerrilla, was rising in power and becoming vocally anti-American. Huerta had then fallen out of power, and many people thought Carranza should be the next president, as many people saw Pancho Villa as just a bandit. Another man, Gutierrez, was chosen as interim president, but this does not stop Villa and Carranza from fighting. And Pancho Villa, now backed by Emilio Zapata, who was one of the leading military generals from southern Mexico, started going back and forth. They were fighting. Ultimately, Pancho Villa was on the losing end of a lot of battles, and he had to retreat to the mountains of Chihuahua with only 200 men left, and the U.S. deciding to support Carranza. This is when Pancho Villa transitioned into his guerrilla leader, because before he was part of like the big army, he had like the country's supplies and everything behind him, and now is whenever he gets his guerrilla warfare tactic, and he crossed the border to attack Columbus, New Mexico. He decided to regain military supplies as the U.S. would no longer supply his army. He carried out a series of different raids around Texas to gain these supplies, in which President Wilson responded by sending 5,000 U.S. Army soldiers. You're messing with a future U.S. Army soldier. Under the command of General Frederick Funston to pursue Pancho Villa. Thanks, Matt. As weird as it sounds, Pancho Villa then offered support from German agents trying to intervene in the Mexican Revolution. Can you imagine a country stepping in somewhere else and trying to intervene with their conflicts? That's crazy.
I know. He was doing like a side mission with the German military.
The Germans wanted to get Huerta reinstated as president, so Pancho Villa refused that offer.
I wonder why they would care about like Mexican politics.
I have no idea. I mean, that's probably what, like 1910 to like 1920s era. So I mean, that's around like World War I time. I don't know. Maybe they're trying to make allies before everything hits the shit hits the fan.
Bismarck's like, we need Mexico.
Yeah.
Well, there is oil in Mexico so that's probably why.
No. Brandon, fact check that also. Why did the Germans want Mexico?
Probably because that was right before World War I, and the Germans did want to have Mexico intervene during World War I, so they probably just wanted to soften up those relationships.
That's what we just said. You just listened to us. So we were right.
You guys.
That was just my assumption.
Thank you. Well, we've been doing this show a long time. We know this stuff. And then real quick, Cucaracha update. Did you find anything?
I did. It apparently originates from around that time period, but it's unclear as to where it actually originated. So, like, some people think it's from like a corrupt politician. Other people think that La Cucaracha was Pancho Villa's like either car or horse or something. So the origins of that song is really debated.
It's one of the biggest bops of the century, probably. Okay, go ahead.
So May 21st, 1920, Carranza, Villa's enemy, along with his top advisors, were assassinated. So Villa took this opportunity to try negotiating peace, as he was getting older and wanted to retire. His peace negotiations were accepted by the Mexican government, and he was granted 25,000 acres as in the form of an estate in Cantuyo, where he was provided housing, to the last 200 guerrilla warriors who supported him, and 50 of them were allowed to serve as his personal bodyguards. So July 20th, 1923, Pancho Villa was assassinated in an ambush while visiting the city Parel, and many people believed it was on the orders of his political enemies. For some reason that day, he went into town with only 3 bodyguards, which was not normal. And when he passed by the local school, a pumpkin seed vendor ran towards his car shouting, "Viva Villa," which was a signal for several riflemen to open fire on his car. Pancho Villa was hit in the head and upper chest, killing him instantly. The next day, his funeral was held, and thousands of grieving supporters followed his casket to the burial site. Also, this is just a weird little fact. I didn't know this before this. His skull is rumored to be in the possession of the Skull and Bones Society at Yale University, that like secret society that like world leaders and like former presidents and powerful people are part of.
It's like rumored that they have a few different skulls, like that they have Geronimo, I think is one of them. So I don't know. It's all weird.
How would you know, Matt?
I'm a member, you know.
I look over at Brendan wearing a Yale University shirt. Fitting.
Brendan, you have anything to say for yourself?
I plead the fifth.
Okay.
That's
respect that. Now, I want to ask you, did you get the vibe that this was all true? I mean, because it's pretty recent, but I worry about figures that are almost like have folklore attached to them, how much of it is true or not. Did you get the vibe that it was mostly...
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, I obviously went on Wikipedia for a lot of that, but there was a lot of documented history about it. Like, I summarized like 50 pages down into like 2. But it's a really interesting story. If you want to read the whole thing, it seems pretty well documented to me, and it is more recent than some of our warriors.
Yeah, that's something that I sort of leads credence to it for me, is that it was so recent.
Yeah.
Robin Hood, I feel like, was what, like BC?
The story of Robin Hood?
Yeah, no.
It originated in the 14th century. I did look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, because like that's a lot easier to be like, okay, how much is true? What season Deadliest War would Robin Hood be, do you think? 4?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Versus like Paul Bunyan.
His story was just kind of crazy though, because like he wanted because Mexico was just run by all these giant estate people who just had kind of like not slave labor, but essentially like slave labor working their land for them. And he just kept rising up on these revolutionary armies, and his allies that would rise up in the revolutionary armies, they would get into power and then immediately become corrupt, and they would be his next wave of enemies. Then someone else would come out of nowhere and like, I'm gonna help you with the revolutionary army raise up again, and then they would become corrupt. And it was just like this kind of crazy storyline.
Yeah. Shout out to Pancho.
You want to hear about rheumatoid arthritis?
Well, we'll get to that. They have a whole Lucas's medical corner in the episode, so we'll cover that.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Crazy Horse before we get there. So,
right.
Yeah, your boy. So Crazy Horse, circa 1876. So pretty close in terms of eras compared to 1914. Age 36, same age. Height 5'8", weight 140 pounds. And before we get into Crazy Horse himself, I got to ask you guys, and probably mostly just Matt, do you remember in elementary school the one World War II veteran who would come in named Crazy Horse?
Yes. Yep.
What?
Yeah,
so,
I was wondering if one of us would mention him or not.
The reason being, I was so confused because I moved to our school in like the 4th grade, and Dan was like one of my first friends, and he told me, oh, on Friday Crazy Horse is coming in. I was like, who? He's like crazy. I was like, his name's Crazy Horse. He's like, yeah, that's his name. And I was like, what the hell? And then I learned about Crazy Horse, and I was like, is he Native American? Like, what is going on?
No. No.
So I guess I wanted to ask you, turn to a legitimate question. Is this a thing that people would do? They would take the name Crazy Horse? Like, did you find anything on that?
I did not find it. It's probably just a nickname he had. Okay. So I know nothing about this guy because the last time I saw him, I think was second grade when he scammed my entire class into buying like his like leather bracelets that he made or whatever, you know.
He's got to be dead.
Oh yeah.
Who knows how much we paid for that? You know, it's like, Mom, I need $10 to get this shitty like stamped thing.
Also, think about like if your grandpa was like, I'm going to elementary school to tell these kids about my time in service in World War II. Would you be like, oh, it's time to put you, let's turn that lock on the door, buddy. Like how weird is it?
He was old.
Right. He was really old.
Old.
I don't think he was like creepy. I just think it's a weird thing to do. What did he have to tell us? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it just didn't make any
wasn't
sense.
Creepy at all. I wonder what the inside track is on that. Like how long he's been going to the school and talking. Like was he the principal's friend or something?
Right. What's the story?
Yeah.
Brendan, look that up.
Was the principal getting kickbacks on the leather bracelets?
Right, maybe.
Bracelets.
There's when you look back at elementary school, there was a whole bunch of like scams where
Like white
you'd have,
ties.
Scholastic Book Fair Day, where it's like they literally sat you down and showed you commercials for books. Children,
one of the best
just
days, though.
unsupervised children. And it's like,
You know, I'm getting.
look at this book.
Okay, not to get too far off topic. I went to see if there's new Captain Underpants book. That was number one.
Yeah. And the new cheat code books.
New cheat code books. A poster. I remember I got a poster of like all the NBA teams. I never watched basketball once.
I got Roller Coaster Tycoon 2.
Yeah.
And that game was the shit.
I got Age of Mythology. That game was awesome.
Sorry. I got Civilization 3 on the computer. It was my first Civ game. Life-changing.
Right, yeah. We may not be
I
here
didn't spend
today.
that money on a fucking book about a frog.
Yeah,
Not this guy. No.
Yeah, because my mom gave me $20 for books, and I was like, I'm gonna buy this video game.
Right.
They used to have that in the Father's Day gifts, and you go in, and it's always like the worst gifts. You can get here's a tie, and your dad just like, thanks.
And like scented
Dad,
candles and like just
I got you
leather,
a silly pencil.
a pocket knife holder, just like the worst shit. Okay, I'm sorry. Let's get back on the rails.
It's all good. My guess with Crazy Horse, to answer your question, the one that would come to our school, he was an old white man. Now, there is a chance he had some kind of percentage Native American, and maybe it was enough to get him a membership on a reservation, and like they gave him a name. But the fact that it's Crazy Horse sort of just leads me to believe he probably got that name, maybe even in the military.
That's what I would
Right.
assume.
He probably got that nickname in the military and just ran with it because it's a fun nickname. So I don't know. But no, he was not a Native American man.
Yeah, if I had to guess,
And when you're old, especially in the early 2000s, you can just say anything and you get away with it because you're old.
like you're a Green
Yeah.
Beret.
Yep, Green Beret. God damn it. All right, so the show gives Crazy Horse a superhero origin story. Saying at age 15 he discovers the carnage of the Blue River Massacre and he becomes an avenging warrior.
Both of these are like superhero origin stories, like with Pancho
Yeah.
Villa and like his sister. Like that's what I thought.
give-
Like, are these fake or like how true are these?
They give him the William Wallace treatment. The show also states Crazy Horse utilized hit and run tactics to take on superiorly, armed and outnumbered opponents that outnumbered him.
Yeah,
With the
And
U.S. cavalry.
You know, with
and
his origin
various-
story too, I realized. You know whose it is? It's pretty much almost identical. It's like the Mandalorians. Doesn't he have like the same story?
Except with instead of droids, it's American cavalry.
Right. Yeah. Unironically, I was like, this is like, not to like turn everything into, but I thought about that because it was so dramatic. And I realized I was like, oh, this is like that.
Well, I got a question for you then. Off of the shelf of my Lego helmets, we got Mandalorian is Crazy Horse. Which one would be Pancho Villa?
Probably Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
They cite the pinnacle of his campaign as the Battle of Little Bighorn, where he defeated General Custard. It's General Custard. All right, I'll hear nothing, nothing to the contrary. Crazy Horse was born. So here's my notes. Okay, the show gets a little bit right. They take some serious dramatic license, though. They definitely tried to like William Wallace him, and very much I don't think it's the case, really. So Crazy Horse was born sometime between 1840 and 1845. The records sort of are disputed. He was a member of the Oglala subtribe of the Lakota, and he lived in present-day Wyoming. His name was actually passed to him from his father, and the show is correct in that Crazy Horse did witness, it's called the Groton Massacre. It's named after the U.S. officer, I think it was General Groton, maybe, who was ordering the U.S. troops. He did witness this massacre at a young age, and it is true that he was a deeply spiritual man who is said to have experienced visions. You know, a lot of Native American tribes have spirituality related to, like, psychedelics, and so those were probably involved. We don't know for sure, though. In one of his visions, he is said to have seen a warrior mounted on horseback who told him that as long as he dressed modestly and did not take any scalps or war trophies, he would not be harmed in battle. This is much in line with the historical accounts of his character, as Crazy Horse was said to be humble, quiet, introverted, deeply spiritual, altruistic, and courageous. Those were just some buzz terms that you seem to get when you hear Native American people talk about him. So it really paints a much different picture than this, like, he's like the Punisher, you know, like, oh, I'm going to kill every Yankee bastard that comes into my land. The Sioux people, the Lakota people, are fighting for their survival, basically, for their way of life. And, you know, Crazy Horse, I mean, this tragedy is obviously a shaping experience as a young adult, but he is not like an irrational or vengeful figure in history. Like, a lot of his decisions, he comes off as very calm and thoughtful. So Crazy Horse would go on to fight in multiple battles against the American military and settlers. You know, I'm not going to go into a bunch of them. We'll go into Little Bighorn, I guess, a bit when we get into tactics. But he was beloved by his people, and he was a great fighter. Battle of Little Bighorn is his most famous victory. Eventually, however, his people were worn down by the United States. All of the buffalo had been slaughtered to near extinction, and they were extremely crucial to the Sioux way of life. And after a particularly brutal winter, he had lost a lot of his people, and it was said basically that he looked at his people and he saw how emaciated they were and how starving they were, and they still looked to him for guidance. They still believed in him, and so he thought it was his duty to make sure that his people survived. And so him and some of his fellow Sioux leaders, there's a whole bunch of characters. They all have cool Native American names. But they surrendered in 1877 to U.S. forces. And though his arrest was ordered, Crazy Horse actually managed to evade capture by U.S. officials. So, like, he lived in a village for, like, a few months, and then they tried to arrest him, but he was already gone by the time they showed up. But eventually, his wife became sick with tuberculosis. And so he took her to a military camp for aid. And there is a lot that sort of goes on in this period. There's like 2 different camps, and there's this colonel and that colonel, and people sort of giving orders back and forth. The simplest version of it, he goes there seeking help for his wife, and the order comes in from down on high that this guy is to be arrested and he is to be packed up and sent somewhere else. Because you see, a lot of the other chiefs had been packed up and sent to various camps, like in Oklahoma and all across the country. And this was to separate them. This was to divide them up. And Crazy Horse wasn't going to do that. So he resisted arrest. And the official U.S. report, some of you might get a little dark humor kick out of this, is that he was killed resisting arrest. Maybe you guys can figure that out. But basically, from accounts of people who were there, what had happened was he started to get aggressive with the guards, and his fellow natives actually grabbed him to hold him back so that he wouldn't be killed. And a U.S. soldier stabbed him in the back with his bayonet. And he was taken to the camp's doctor, who has an awesome name, Valentine McGillicuddy. And
that's my
Dr.
Red Dead Redemption character.
That's awesome.
Isn't Dr. McGillicuddy a cheap, like flavored alcoholic drink?
Thinking of
you can
Dr.
buy
Squatch.
Yeah, Dr. Squatch. Well, anyways, Dr. Valentine McGillicuddy, he wrote a lot of memoirs of his time at that camp, and it's actually a really good primary source for historians about what happened. Crazy Horse would die from his wounds, and his body would be given back to his people, who laid him to rest in a big ceremony. But they actually moved his They moved his body immediately afterward. And I think, if I'm correct, Lucas, Pancho Villa's head was stolen from his gravesite, I think.
Yeah,
So,
I think that it's like one of those rumors where it got like, this person stole it and this person stole it and and then that's how it ended up with like, Skull and Bones has it now. And
well, this was to avoid that. So his body was buried somewhere else afterward, and no one knows where it is for certain. But modern historians and scientists have narrowed it down to 4 possible locations, and you can actually go visit them. They're marked. It's basically like, hey, he might be buried here.
Got a 1 in 4 shot.
Going into today, there's also currently a sculpture of Crazy Horse being carved into stone in the Black Hills of South Dakota called the Crazy Horse Memorial. Here, I'll throw that up on as my background here. Boom. Hell yeah. This is next level technology, boys. Maybe Craig can get a full screen image or something. But yeah, he lives on in legend. And fun fact about him is there are no known photographs taken of him. There have been multiple fakes disproven over the years. There is, however, one sketch of him known to the public that was released by his family. So this sketch right here is the closest thing we have to knowing what Crazy Horse looked like. So, yeah, very interesting figure. Not really, he's looked upon throughout history as like a great leader and someone who just kind of fought to save his people. And you see that in his actions. And of course, he was put on a stamp in the 1980s. So, yeah, cool figure.
We're talking about earlier. I think it was Craig. You said like, is that a name that's just like given Crazy Horse, whatever, too? I think I could be wrong, but I read somewhere that he was the 4th person in his family to be named Crazy Horse. So it was like a really common name in his family.
Yeah, I don't know that for certain. I just know he got it from his dad.
Yeah, I think I read that. I could be wrong. Someone could fact check me later, but I think he was like the 4th person in his family to have that name.
Brennan. That's all you. No. Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. Let's go on to the little disclosure, the little conversation that they have about the evil X factors of Pancho Villa's rheumatoid arthritis and Crazy Horse is hungry. And also, I don't know if they mention it here, but they do later, that he could have gotten tuberculosis and smallpox, which I guess we'll unload on that when the time comes. But let's just focus on those two that they bring up. Rheumatoid arthritis.
Your grandma has it.
Yeah, Pancho Villa. And then the fact that Crazy Horse might be hungry because food sources were dying is so hypothetical. Like, what if Pancho Villa had to go to the bathroom at that time? What if Pancho Villa, he stubbed his toe and he had like an ingrown toe at the like. What do you mean? Like, what if he's hungry? Can we just factor that out?
Yeah,
that's what all season 3 is all about.
So much made. Like, disease gets brought up, but something that gets brought up consistently throughout this episode, it's cited as like the number one reason Pancho Villa, wins. I don't know why I acted like that was a spoiler that nobody knew, but it's cited as like the number one reason he wins is logistics. And I like that you brought that up, Craig, because it's just like, it makes, like, logistics makes sense, but for Deadliest Warrior, it doesn't. Right. Because when you start, it opens a whole can of worms that's like, okay, if Crazy Horse is hungry and he doesn't have enough ammo, like, why are we taking him at that low point? Are we also going to take Pancho Villa at his lowest point? I don't.
And even if you do, then why? Like, if you're both bringing both of them at their low point, and they're both pretty old, 36. But why do that?
Yeah, and it's an interesting point, but I think back to this military saying where it's like a old maxim or whatever that soldiers win battles, but logistics wins wars, and so logistics is a very relevant thing for like a war or a revolution, but does that apply here? Does that apply to a 5-on-5 in a computer? Like, it's just this rolling wave in season 3 where the computer, instead of downplaying it at any point, it just gets more and more complex, more and more sophisticated. Like, no, but you don't understand. The logistics are being taken into account here. Like, Crazy Horse might be hungry. and just so I'm not being biased here, the disease thing is also absurd. Like, the fact that Pancho Villa could have caught smallpox.
You know what? I changed my opinion on the hunger thing, and I have a story to explain it.
Okay.
So, Crazy Horse, let's say he's going for like a stealth approach, right? When I set this new studio up earlier, I went to take a Snapchat to send it to you guys, and I was hungry at the time. And in the video, I heard my stomach go, and it was really loud in the video. So imagine he's sneaking through the brush, and his stomach goes, he's fucked.
That his syphilis rating goes up too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a mess.
Pancho Villa is going to be like,
Pancho Villa's joints are just cracking, and
he's like trying to get his gun.
What Pancho Villa are we looking at?
Hungry Pancho Villa, sick Pancho Villa fighting hungry Crazy Horse is not what anybody tuned in for. Like,
What era are we looking at? I mean, to go against my own guy for a second, but I think I put this argument later when we're talking about logistics and the X Factor. What era of Pancho Villa are we looking at? Are we looking at where he's in the federal army as like a brigadier general? Or are we looking at when he's leading like a band of 200 guerrilla people who's not backed by anyone and on the run from Mexican and U.S. government?
Yeah. What if they were like Crazy Horse, the hungry Native American war chief from Lakota tribe, and Pancho Villa, the stiff hero of Mexican folklore?
Yeah.
Just to give people for some preparation.
I wondered the same thing too, Lucas. Like, what time are we looking at? Because you have to assume when they pull those battles, like, that is the specific snapshot in time that they're looking at with these warriors. Like, you look at how significant San Juan Hill is in the Teddy Roosevelt episode and how significant the Battle of Orleans is in the Joan of Arc episode. And, like, Crazy Horse at Little Bighorn is arguably at the height of his power. This is, like, when the Lakota tribe has all come together because they need to, they think they need to fight the Americans if they're going to have a future on their own land. And that's actually, like, it's the reason they don't cite the Battle of Little Bighorn. They cite, like, an adjacent battle to it in the battle tactics that they talk about, because Little Bighorn is not necessarily, like, a strategic victory or anything. Like, Custard is going in there to catch these rebels, and he thinks there's way fewer of them than there are, and so he gets aggressive because he is thinking they're retreating away from him, and he doesn't want them to get away. And then when he gets there, he discovers, like, oh shit, like, every Lakota is here. And
he did the Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, basically, he Leroy Jenkins'd him and his men into, like, the heart of the enemy. And, it was surrounded and pew-pew from there. But if we're going with that Crazy Horse, like, Little Bighorn era, like, he's at the height of his power and supplies at that point. So we'll get more into it when we talk about X Factors. I don't want to bury the episode here, but I'm glad you brought it up, Craig. It's disease and logistics are both, like, so weird to bring up. And I'll just say this. I don't think the show is made better by bringing them up. Like,
Right.
It's part of the downside of season 3. As cool as it, like, the potential it has to be, we're like we're going to take these factors into it. They just do it all wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the experts before we get into the coup de grace. So, not too much to say, really. Let's start with Moses Brings Plenty. He is billed as a Lakota tribesman and firearms expert. He might be our Crazy Horse stand-in, if I had to guess.
yeah, that was the vibes I got.
Right. So, my research, he is an actor. What's strange, so there's a show called Yellowstone. A lot of parents watch it.
I was about to say your mom and dad watch it.
Yeah.
If you're watching this podcast, your parents watch Yellowstone.
I don't have a gauge on how popular it is, but I keep hearing it brought up, like, did you watch Yellowstone? So anyway, but what's weird is he, like, plays himself. His character is named Mo Brings Plenty. So I assume it's fictional. So
What, did he just drop the S from his name? And that's his character?
well, I think that what his friends call him is Mo.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that's a nickname.
Yeah.
Maybe Taylor Sheridan, who's the guy that creates and writes that show, maybe he was like, so come on in, and any Native American name he could think of was way worse.
Yeah.
Than, like, way less cool or unique. He's going like he's going like King of the Hill, like John Redcorn or whatever. And he's like, "What's your name?" Moses Brings Plenty. That's badass. We're keeping that.
Right. There's a story there. And then interestingly, a couple things. He played, prior to Deadliest Warrior, he played Crazy Horse in a miniseries called The Wild West, which is fun. And also, I saw on IMDb, at least in one area, I think on his page, that he's credited for this episode as Comanche Hero. And it wasn't like he played on the Comanche episode. In this specifically, he's called Comanche Hero. So it's weird that he's not self or expert, but at least they acknowledge that the show is fake. So that's him. Next is Delano Blue Eagle, listed as a former Marine and Lakota tribesman. Research, I found absolutely nothing. I found a bike that was called Delano Blue Eagle, but that was it. Fernando Vasquez, he's our one Pancho Villa expert. I believe he's the Pancho Villa stand-in. Billed as an expert marksman and horseman. My research, I was dreading having to look up the name Fernando Vasquez, and I found nothing either.
Yeah, that's the first thing. When you got here today, I was like, and we were talking about the experts, I was like, there's no way you found anything. Because I typed in his name, and I got like 16 different people.
You find like a lawyer, you find a murderer, you find like a grocery store. So
Googling John Smith.
Yeah.
You know.
So that was tough. I lucked out on that one, or whatever the opposite of that is. And then last, you got Santiago Villalobos. Definitely the chillest, I think. He's probably the expert I like to hang out with the most.
Yes. I too thought he was sort of I think all the experts are good on this episode. I thought Santiago was, if we have to pick a standout, I do like that when he's introduced, he's twirling a bolo knife and they insert the swoosh sound effect.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
I don't know. Fernando, man, you could like take a nap in that guy's mustache.
it is a
He
cool
is
mustache.
Cool. Right.
Yeah.
Well, Santiago, they say on the show he's the son of one of Pancho Villa's generals. I didn't fact check that. I'll just take him at his word. Research. He is an actor, director. I did find his Twitter and Instagram, and I am most proud to say that he did not forget his roots. This was 13 weeks ago. He posted, "Have a Deadliest Warrior kind of weekend, homies." Hashtag TGIF, and it's him on the set.
Yo,
is he watching?
Do you watch?
Yeah.
You watch the show?
If one of you are Santiago, you better fucking speak up right now.
Right.
Yeah. Leave a comment, and I'm telling you, I will know if you're not the real Santiago. So don't be leaving me fake messages like, Matt, it's me, Santiago. I will know.
Right.
All right.
You know what's funny? We say these things, and then like no one does them. So
Yeah,
they listen
right?
to us,
Yeah.
our fans.
Yeah. Well, our fans are good.
Yeah, they're not
cool.
bad.
So, yeah.
All right, well, we got anything for Matt's movie corner?
Yeah. So,
Wait, there's got to be a movie
Before-
called Crazy Horse, right? There's got to be at least
yes.
one.
Yes. There's two. There's like two. But before we get in the intro, Robert Daly, we get a shot of his computer. And we get the secret X factors. You remember I discovered these in earlier episodes, and we talked about it.
These
in
are the
whole
hidden
pod
X
episode.
factors. Remember the last thing we recorded? This must be
The
what
hidden-
they are.
Yeah. So the secret X factors they had on the computer for Crazy Horse, they had decoy tactics, fearless, just the word fearless, and weapon adept. Now, for Pancho Villa, they have Revenge,
What?
Centaur of the North.
What?
Whoa, okay. Wait, that time out.
No, it gets better. It gets better. There's one more. And then the word Golpe Terrifico, which I think they explain later in the episode as his tactic. But when I was first watching, I saw Golpe Terrifico, and I just wrote throat goat ?
Yeah, it's the El Golpe Terrifico, which is the perfect blow.
Pancho Villa, the throat goat, baby.
Well, what's Crazy Horse's Golpe Terrifico stat?
Yeah.
if they're X Factors,
What's George Washington's?
what's his throat score?
Right. What's Napoleon's Centaur of the North? Right.
I assume they mean like northern Mexico, but what does that even
So,
mean?
yeah,
He's
he's...
pictured Jon Snow. Or Rob
So,
Snow.
yes. Is a Game of Thrones name?
The Centaur of the
You mean-
North.
You mean the Centaur of the North?
Yeah, that was a
So
good find.
I thought you'd like those, but so Pancho Villa is Revenge, Centaur of the North, and Throat Goat. So I don't know what kind of edge that gives him, but
All of them.
moving into Matt's movie corner. So I just have a few here. We have 1955 film called Chief Crazy Horse. I think it's available through Stars, though I was forced to find it through other means. Funny enough, Crazy Horse in this movie is played by Victor Mature, who is the same guy that played Hannibal in the 1959 Hannibal movie I mentioned in that episode. So if this movie is your type of thing, like this old kind of movie, it's only an hour and 43 minutes. It's a bit dated, but some of the action still holds up, and it was fun. Then there is a TV movie that's hour and 30 minutes. It's called Crazy Horse, and it's from 1996. I was unable to find this movie anywhere, but I'm sure some of you internet soldiers can find it. Michael Greyeyes plays Crazy Horse, and it has mixed reviews, but, I don't know. So I thought I'd mention it. For Pancho Villa, Mike Moroff plays a fictional Pancho Villa in George Lucas's Young Indiana Jones in the episode Spring Break Adventure. You can watch the entire series of Young Indiana Jones, including this episode, on Disney+. So
I watched
Disney,
a Spring Break
give us-
Adventure, but I don't think it was the right one.
What's that?
I watched a Spring Break Adventure. I don't think it was the right one.
Pool party.
Pool party. Now, the gem, the diamond in the rough that I found, though, was an HBO movie called And starring Pancho Villa as himself. It's from 2003, and it stars Antonio Banderas as Pancho Villa.
Who else would play Pancho Villa during that time?
Yeah. It's an hour and 50 minutes. Now, I have to say, this movie was super cool and super cool to talk about on the pod because this is a movie about a movie made in 1914 called The Life of General Villa. Okay? Essentially, so it's based on like a true story, which is why it's called and starring Pancho Villa as himself. It was a bunch of filmmakers from that time got an invite from Pancho Villa to come down and film him and like some of the battle scenes because he wanted, basically there was this propaganda thing going on where Pancho Villa he's a revolutionary, he's taken from the rich, giving to the poor. He's seen as like a socialist, which of course, to the Americans is like, all right, let's keep an eye on this young guy, we might have to kill him. And so he wanted the American public to see him in a favorable light, and the trade-off is that this is a chance for American filmmakers for like the first time. I'm not sure if it was the first time ever, but it's one of the first instances that they actually get to film real combat. So they filmed real battles. They're like on the battlefield. They're filming people getting shot and dying. And this movie is a dramatization about that movie being made. And essentially what they're doing is you're following the main character, who is like a producer named Francisco, who he gets sent down by the studio. Studio head is Horace Slughorn from Harry Potter. He gets sent down by the studio to go meet Pancho Villa and film this stuff. And he's a fish out of water character. He's a gringo. He doesn't speak a lick of Spanish. And he meets Pancho Villa, and they become friends. And so it's like through his eyes, you get to see the character of Pancho Villa and his revolution and his motivations, the movie's interpretation of it. And I thought it was really fascinating because it's like you're talking about, Craig. It's like cutting through the mythology and trying to give you like, here's a real person, and here are the ups and downs of his character and his revolution. And funny enough, that movie, The Life of General Villa, was real. It got made, and it did air some places in the United States. It was the first movie put out to be like an hour long, and to offset the film costs, they raised it from 5 cents a ticket to 10 cents a ticket. And there was a big question mark over whether people would sit through an hour-long movie and whether people would want to see something like real violence depicted on screen. The answer to both those questions is yes.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, that film is lost. You can't find it anymore. They don't have it. But an interesting thing is, I forget which museum it is, but they have in a museum the original contract that Pancho Villa signed with the film studio. So I would highly recommend it. It was really fun.
You stumbled on, I think, an interesting movie then.
Yeah, it was a really good movie because I looked it up and I was like, what the fuck is this? Antonio Banderas is Pancho. It's got a goofy name. But I sat down and watched it. It's on HBO if you have it. And I sat down and watched it, and I was like, that was actually really good and really fascinating and useful for the podcast, too. So,
most importantly,
check it out. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Dang.
Oh, I do want to mention, sorry, it wasn't in my notes. When I went back through and rewatched this episode after watching that movie, they use battle footage from the HBO movie in this episode.
I was going to say, there's definitely
Yeah.
some stock footage in this episode, but
There's some
Yeah.
good stock footage later in the episode.
we'll get to that. Well, let's move on finally to the weapons, the reason you guys are all here. So long range, we got the 1860 Henry repeating rifle. So this rifle segment's like half the episode. Stats: a length of 43 inches, weight of 9 pounds, a range of 200 yards, pretty far I feel like for this type of rifle, and a mag capacity of 15 rounds. What do we got on the 1860 Henry repeating rifle? I don't remember whose this is.
Well,
I think it's Pancho.
what
Villa.
you see is what you get.
That's crazy.
I fact-checked. They mentioned there's a place at Little Bighorn called Henry Hill. I was inconclusive on that research. It has the Deadliest Warrior curse, where the Deadliest Warrior wiki keeps showing up. But they mention a quote, "That damn Yankee gun they'd load it on Sunday and shoot at us all week." This is a quote actually about the 1860 Henry from Confederate soldiers, and it's relating to its magazine capacity. So the exact quote goes, "That damned Yankee rifle that they'd load on Sunday and shoot all week." So because it was especially superior compared to, like, in the Civil War, people are still using breech loading muskets, single shot. So having a lever action rifle that can shoot 15 rounds in rapid succession is a huge game changer. So that's all I really found about the Henry, because the rest, you can look up on Wikipedia if you want to. So.
Cool. It seemed pretty cut and dry. Next, we have the Winchester 1894 repeating rifle. Stats: 38 inches, weight 7 pounds, range also 200 yards, and a 10-round mag capacity. Lucas, tell us about the Winchester repeating rifle.
All right, get comfortable. I got a whole history lesson. I'm just kidding. So first, I just want to cover whether he would actually be using this. There's no direct proof I could find because there's a lot of photographs of Pancho Villa. But he undoubtedly used this, as the 1894 Winchester it's so common that he probably used it at some point. And there's pictures of him holding the 1895 Winchester model, which was the year later. Interesting enough, during his peak years during the Mexican Revolution, the weapon he was most often spotted with was a German Mauser. So some conspiracy theory there. Apparently there was a Mexican variation on the German Mauser where they would take them and kind of customize them a little bit, and they called them like Mexican Mausers.
Yes.
So the 1894 Winchester was like the AK-47, essentially of the West. It was literally everywhere. They still make it. They discontinued them in 2006 and brought it back in like 2011, but they've been making them literally since then, which is, hundreds of years at this point. So the Model 94 is a lever-action hunting rifle designed by John Browning. Originally fired the .32-40 caliber and the .38-55 caliber, and it was the first rifle ever to be chambered with a smokeless .30-30 round in 1895. So everyone kind of associates that with lever-action rifles. The following years, it was chambered in a shit ton of calibers. If you name it, it's pretty much chambered in it. And 4440 is... I think it takes until the pistol segment to like kind of mention, because they say that his pistol and rifle fired the same caliber. So the one that we're getting on the show is the 4440.
I actually I wrote down 30-30 as the Winchester's caliber because I noticed they didn't mention it, and then I was shocked when they said, "Oh, well, it's chambered in the same round as his rifle," and I was like, so they went with a little 44-40 action so that they could like even up the rifles, as much as possible. So
it's almost like they have like the same.
Just another example of the fuckery that goes on in this episode. Okay, the anti-crazy horse fuckery.
I'm pretty sure at some point in like both of these guys' careers, they would just be taking whatever they can get. But yeah, they're still in production today. You can still buy one if you want one. They have a 9+1 capacity. If you know what that means, you know what that means. These are fantastic guns, essentially the principle of tried and true. They've been around forever. Like most guns, they're capable of jamming if you get too dirty or if you short stroke the lever. But they're pretty reliable. That's about all I have on it.
Cool.
Well, Pancho Villa, the throat goat, ain't short stroking nothing, baby.
Yeah, that Throto Terrifico.
I don't know, rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay, let's go on to the test. So, first test is a speed accuracy test. They set up a bunch of foam dummies and beef. So I believe it's Moses goes first.
Let me just say, this is perhaps some of the worst shooting.
Dude, I'm fucking pissed.
In Deadliest Warrior.
That's my first note. I am not happy about this test. Both of these guys need glasses.
Apparently, Moses must have got a lot of shit because he like had to defend himself on the aftermath, where he was like, "It's not as easy as it looks." But
it's also important to remember that this test, and there's two very clear points of evidence that prove it, is fake. 100%.
Right.
So we don't know how many hits anybody got, or
it's like weirdly that. Like this is type of like one you don't think would need to be faked, but at least the biggest offender I see is a horrendously fake blood trail at 9 minutes 33 seconds. Now it seemed like the bullet hole was real, but like was the blood fake? I don't entirely know what's going on, because on Amazon you can't go like frame by frame. So I'll try to go as slow as I can when I edit it. But
are you talking about a different shot from the CGI edit onto the beef that they do?
No, I think this was into a foam dummy. So there's probably a lot of...
because there's one, Fernando's last shot, his fourth hit on the target.
Well, this is Moses' first.
Okay, yeah, all right. So we're still on Moses. My bad. There's a CGI clip art thing in Fernando's shooting. His last shot, they like clip art onto the beef, and they're like, "Oh, 4 shots, Fernando!" And I like jumped up out of my chair. I was like, "Motherfucker!"
Yeah. My only thought is that maybe he did record 4 shots, but they didn't catch them all. They didn't have enough footage, so they just had some tight shots of beef and foam, and then fixed it in post. I don't know, but so Mo finishes. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know if I mentioned this. We get a jam, which I do not believe that Moses fixes himself. They edit it to make it look like Moses figured it out. There's no way.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's most likely fake, like every other jam.
I don't even believe the jam.
Right.
Yeah. He's just kind of like fiddling with the lever, and it's like which is what they do. They have them like, you remember with the light machine guns, they like eject a couple rounds, and then they're like, the jam's cleared.
Yeah.
If it's ejecting rounds, it's been cleared.
So the time is 1:15 and a hit rate of 40%, which Jeff criticizes. So next we have the 1894 Winchester. Fernando takes 48 seconds, so a good bit slower. Also gets a 40% hit rate. And somehow Armand is able to determine what would or wouldn't be a mortal wound on an indiscriminate slab of beef. So we were talking about this. Armand is on one this episode, more than usual. It's like this glob of cow flesh. And he's like, this one is a kill because it's in the amphibular destimier. And this one, he's walking away from this one. So I don't know how he does that, but he's the doctor, not me. And they say only one instant kill.
Right. And I swear there's a shot in this episode, I don't remember if it was these tests, where Dorian does go, this shot where it's placed is not a kill shot, but if it was moved up into the chest, that would be an instant kill. It's like, thank you, Dorian.
Right.
Thanks. If he gets shot in the foot, he's not going to die right away, but if that bullet hits him in the head, he's gone.
Really?
Thank you.
Yeah. So then we get one of my favorite lines of the episode from Dorian. They're talking about the test or whatever and how everyone did. And they're talking about the rifles and the test they just did with the rifles. Dorian chimes in and says, during that time, disease actually killed more than any one of these rifles.
Cool. Then why aren't we testing that?
I was like, okay, so this whole test was a waste of time.
But during that time, disease actually killed more people than either one of these rifles, which has to come into factor and come into play. Correct me if I'm wrong, Crazy Horse just missed the big epidemic with regards to smallpox. And then tuberculosis. You want to be ineffective in the battlefield? Try fighting when your lungs are filling up with blood.
And it's like, they're testing these rifles, and you get some asshole. Well, yeah, he hit the beat, but what about tuberculosis?
Right.
It's like, oh, who fucking cares?
Why don't we just have the experts sneeze on the targets instead?
Pancho Villa's men are like doing snot rockets at the Crazy Horse and buying their time.
They'd probably have better accuracy than they're shooting.
Maybe. But yeah, that was awesome.
Some very boomer energy coming from that comment. That is like, well, what's better than a video game? Throw in the old pigskin.
Yeah. Why would you? I don't understand why you would play a football video game when you could just play it in real life.
You can play it in real life.
This test is so BS too. It was like a minute 15 for the Henry, but 48 seconds for the Winchester. When the Winchester fires 5 less rounds, so does that time limit that's fake to begin with mean anything? When they shouldn't they have had the Winchester? I'm going against my own guy, but shouldn't they had him reload 5 rounds and fire 5 more?
That's true with reload speed.
No, they have to. And it's important to note, when they get to the edge, they take absolutely nothing from these tests into consideration.
Oh, I know. It's completely stupid.
Mac and Jeff just pull shit out of their ass when they get to the edge.
This one
well,
clickier.
Yeah,
right. We'll get there, but I do want to say with this test, the other bullshit they bring up is the hit percentage. They're like, well, yeah, he hit 6, the Henry hit 6 targets and the Winchester hit 4, but it's the same hit ratio. And it's like, okay, yeah, but that's the advantage of having a 15-round magazine over a 10-round magazine, is that when you get 40%, that's 2 more fuckers dead, all right, than your gun. So
their shooting reminds me of A Million Ways to Die in the West, when the blonde girl's trying to teach Seth MacFarlane to fire his pistol, and he's shooting and he misses the bottle, and he walks up and puts the gun up against the bottle and he's still firing and it's just not breaking.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, let's go to test 2, shall we? Then we can get into your edge bitch.
Oh yeah.
So we get a horseback test with 5 targets back to back. So they kind of do a drive-by. All the cutouts are pictures of the experts, which I don't think they've ever done before, which is a little bit weird. And first, because Mo goes first, they're cutouts of Fernando wearing a huge sombrero and a bandolier.
Yeah, did you notice Jeff was like,
Oh well, yeah, I'll on the joke
Okay,
he says,
sorry.
yeah, no. So first off, for these pictures, I can't help but feel like there's something you'd find on like your racist uncle's front lawn. I don't know if it's the look on Fernando's face, but with the bandolier and everything, I'm like, I don't know about this one, but
Craig, wait till you get to the reenactment.
okay,
You think these signs are bad?
yeah. So yeah, as Matt alluded to, Jeff makes a comment because Fernando is like 4 foot tall.
So we've got our Fernando target set up here, about the right size. Okay.
He like backs off. It was scripted, but also Fernando doesn't really look like he's joking. So I don't know. It's a
2010 TV, baby, or whatever year this came out.
It's a dad joke, but I won't lie. I laughed at it. I thought it was funny. So
yeah.
It got a genuine laugh out of me.
He's a funny little guy.
Yeah.
So they do the drive-by. Moses gets 3 hits, and none of them are kills. Matt comments that Moses worked with the horse, and I'm not sure what that means. Fernando then does his drive-by, also gets 3 hits, no kills. Jeff says that because the action... Oh, wait. Well, that's the edge.
Yes, yeah.
And I just want to say this. I don't know how this edge was not even, because the first test, 40% hit rate, 40% hit rate. One was a little bit faster. This test, 3 hits, no kills. If you look at the guns, they look exactly the same. I mean, the weight's a little bit different, but if you're taking the results of the test, I don't know how this is not even. But Jeff says that because the action is smoother, and Max says the magazine is exposed, they give the edge to the Winchester.
Okay, am I allowed to bitch now?
Yeah, go ahead.
They completely ignored that could have been like a legitimate thing to do is the reloading process of these 2 guns.
Mm-hmm.
The Henry is a little more difficult to reload, and I think they mentioned that it has like a little bit of the exposed spring on the magazine later, but they could have covered like, I don't know, do like a reload or something like that, because I mean the Model 94 is a newer rifle, and they kind of worked out a little bit of the reloading process. That's probably the biggest difference between these 2 rifles that they could have used as like reasoning, but yeah.
Yeah, so bizarre, Lucas. I found it frustrating. Like, this is the first time I've watched this episode in years, and I'm sitting there, and they're doing these tests, and I'm like, well, these guns seem very even. And I thought it'll just be the jam that, like, swings it to the Winchester, because that's... They are doing everything they can to pad the fucking Winchester, okay? But based on what we saw, it doesn't get the edge over the Henry. And, you know, like, Fernando, he doesn't seem to hit shit.
No,
They
he shot
have to
like shit.
Yeah, they have to clip art in his 4th hit. Like, there's no discernible advantage. And the only thing on paper between these 2 guns is that the Henry has 15 rounds, the Winchester has 10. And color me shocked when we get to the edge and Jeff's like, okay, yeah, so those guys didn't shoot very well. The action on this is really smooth. And Mac's like, yeah, you know, and you remember that jam we faked? That's because the magazine is exposed. And it's like, okay, was his Henry magazine dirty in the fucking test? Is that why it jammed? What the fuck? And how does that stat go into the computer? Is Crazy Horse's team having a jam once every 15 shots somewhere? Like, how does that even factor out? It's so fucking stupid. And then if you want to make the argument that the Winchester gets the edge over the Henry, and you want to make it about ergonomics, what you were saying, Lucas, with the reload speed, it's a newer rifle, okay, it's more advanced, and if you want to bring up the action, that makes for a greater rate of fire, okay? It is a more light and more mobile gun than the Henry. There are reasons to give the Winchester the edge. I think they botched this so badly. Like, it's like you said, Craig, they come off as just looking like 2 identical rifles, basically. Like, one is gold plated and one's got like black steel. Like,
Brass.
and that's it.
It's brass.
Yeah, you're right.
Complete the
brass.
mastery challenge.
His gold plated Henry, Crazy Horse's gold plated Desert Eagle.
Oh, who would buy that? That's dumb. They should have just cut out this entire section and just taken Moses and Fernando to lens crafters. We could have just had a whole thing of number 1, number 2, number 1, number 2,
Okay, 3
Yeah.
and
now
4.
4.
Now this is gonna shoot a little thing of hot air. Try to
Dude,
keep
that's
your eye
the
open.
worst when they go in there. It's that like puff of air in your eye, and you're like,
I saw something that was like only people with bad eyes get PTSD from this image, and it was like the little farmhouse. Okay, anyway, enough eye doctor.
yeah, they
jokes.
could have. I mean, these weapons, yeah, they come across like they're the same weapon, but they're really not, and they could have represented it 1,000 times better.
Right.
Grievance relievance.
Grievance relieved. Well, let's move on to medium range. So we have the Cole Beasley. Stats are a length of 11 inches, weight of 1 pound, 13 ounces, a range of 50 yards, and a caliber of 44. 40.
Craig,
says,
did you call it the Cole Beasley?
Yeah, I did. I'm sad you noticed on the first. That's all I was thinking of this whole time. I don't know what it's fucking called. Oh, the Bisley. I just kept saying Cole Beasley. So
Cole Beasley.
I'm gonna say Beasley. So Doran says the wider hammer of the Beasley will help Pancho because of his arthritis. So tell us about this weapon.
Sure. This is another gun that came in a variety of calibers, and essentially all it is a variation of the Colt single action army, which is pretty much what the other gun is. Spoiler. The only difference between this really is the grip frame. It was built off the single action army platform, but it was designed to meet the demands of shooters competing in the Bisley pistol matches in Great Britain. So it had a lower, wider hammer spur and distinct hump, inward curving grips, allowing the shooter to aim with the wrist and elbow still bent, so kind of limp dick in it. And another article I found about his arthritis, the only other one I could ever find about it, it said that he chose this pistol because it had an easier action. And that article kind of sounded like BS to me, though. Maybe that's why, or maybe he just liked the design of this because of the funky grip. Very few of these were actually shipped across the pond from Britain to the United States. Pretty much all the ones that did made their way into cowboys and outlaws in like northern Mexico, southern United States. Pancho Villa was photographed many times with his Colt Bisley on his hip, and it was actually the gun he was reaching for when he was shot to death in his car. It was said that he owned several of them, and one resides in the Autry Museum of American West. One thing I do want to cover real quick, since they kind of glance over it, but I feel like it's kind of important. What is 4440? Because it's not a common caliber now.
Lucas, is this a Bisley right here?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Seriously, is that what it? There's a Pancho Villa.
Well, the only difference between that is the grip, and I can't see the grip because he's holding it. So,
well, it's right here. It's coming out.
Confirmed.
You can't be the throat goat without being the grip king.
If you look at it next to the Colt, like they look exactly the same, except on the Bisley, the like grip is literally like, it kind of looks dumb that it's like inward a little bit too much, and you're like, I don't know if I'd want to hold that.
That's what this looks like.
Yeah,
it's like
so that's
curved.
probably
it's
it.
like Count Dooku's lightsaber.
It's the Count Dooku's lightsaber of Colt single action armies is essentially what it is.
Yeah, I think that's it.
So the 4440, so some people, including myself, aren't completely fresh on what it is, so I want to cover it. It was a rifle and handgun caliber developed in 1873 by Winchester for their new 73 model rifle. It was simply known as 44 Winchester and was a black powder round originally. It gained its 4440 name after World War II, so it was used for a long time, but by that time it had essentially begun being phased out as it was outdated. It's gone through a resurgence in popularity a couple times as the 1960s and recently in cowboy action shooting competitions. Yeehaw. Also, this article said the Model 73 Winchester was the gun that won the West, which is also what they say about the Model 94. It was the gun that won the West. So pretty much every Winchester out of that era is just the gun that won the West.
That sounds like something a marketing guy came up with.
Right? This one, brother. It's the one that won the West. And your dad's like, ugh. It had a muzzle velocity around 1,000 feet per second up to 1,200 feet per second, depending on the grain. That's about it. Interesting round, I guess. Historical. It was the gun that won the West.
Allegedly. All right, so that is Cole Beasley.
Cole Beasley.
Yes. 1873 Colt's our next gun, wielded by Mr. Horse. So stats are 13 inches length, weight 2 pounds 5 ounces, a range of 50 yards, caliber 45. Moses says that it has a 30% longer barrel. Matt, you want to take it from there?
I mean, I don't know if Lucas did any research on this. It seemed pretty self-evident to me. I mean, it is what it is. It's a revolver, Chamberlain 45 Colt. They say a 30% barrel length difference, but like according to the stats, it's only 2 inches longer.
You can also get those in like any barrel length you want. There's like a million variations on. I mean, both guns could come in whatever barrel length you wanted. So I mean, that's just what they sourced for the show, I guess.
Yeah,
sure. It's just what they had. It's just the gun they could most easily get their hands on.
These are the same gun.
Somebody had it.
Except for the grip is a little bit like more inward on one of them.
The caliber is different too, which plays into like the tests that they do. My only note was that they play some footage of Teddy's Rough Riders getting gunned down, but they intersplice it with they do it like an old cowboy movie where you film the guys shooting and then you film the guys going falling over. They do that in this where they have footage of Deadliest Warrior Pancho Villa going like this, and then they have the Rough Rider footage. It's literally from the reenactment where they're getting shot by like Lawrence's men. And they're just going down. So I don't know. I thought it was funny. So
well, sorry, I was looking at something. I was listening.
Craig, Sydney Sweeney's trending on Twitter, and Craig's on that page. So he's a little.
Here, ask me about my pistol again.
Lucas, was it your pistol?
Cole Beasley is an American football wide receiver who is he's free agent right now. He played college at Southern Methodist University.
Listen, teams are going to be too many teams asked for his Vax card. That's why he's not playing right now. It's the only reason. Okay. So the first test of the pistols, they fire it through a chronometer, which Jeff calls a crony, which is fun, and into some FBI grade ballistics gel. So the Beasley goes first. It fires clean through, almost no tumbling, 1168 FPS. The 1873 tumbles as it enters the gel, causing more damage, 997 FPS. I thought it was interesting that the gun that actually shoots slower is more deadly in this case.
Yes. Yeah, that was the philosophy. So this is a different 45 round, but it's the same. Let me explain what I mean by that. So the 45 Colt is long, and they put it in revolvers. The 45 ACP is the same bullet, but it's a much shorter cartridge, and that gets put in like semi-automatics. When the Colt 1911, which is 45 caliber, was invented, what was happening was U.S. servicemen were fighting indigenous people in the Pacific. And these are like Maori type guys or Samoan maybe. And so they're these big islander dudes, and they're taking like, drugs and stuff that they would take for battle. And these guys, if they would close the distance with your average American grunt, they were just clubbing them to death. And the grunts had a 38 caliber revolver. So they would shoot, and The problem is, we've brought this up before because it is the debate that gets mentioned about the 45 versus the 9mm. Not necessarily applicable to this matchup of revolvers, but a similar concept that's going on. The round that's going faster is going straight through the body and leaving a small wound, basically like the size of a bullet hole. Whereas something that is smacking into the body, traveling slower, is more apt to stop and tumble inside and create more physical trauma and damage. Because if you are a giant Islander dude hopped up on drugs and someone shoots you with a 9mm and it passes clean through you, you might not even feel it. Whereas the 45 is intended that it's a big, slow round. When it hits you, you're going to feel it. You're going to go down. So it was interesting to see that in the ballistic gel, like that tumbling effect or that traveling slow. I'm glad you mentioned that, Craig, because it is a fun little counterintuitive thing about bullets.
The term they always like slap on top of that is stopping power.
Right. Yes.
That's like the fun term for it.
Yeah. Stopping power is like kinetic energy, and that temporary cavity that's created is cited as like stopping power a lot of times.
And
Because
sometimes
it's just
the
like
slower, bigger one creates the bigger cavity.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah,
you
it's
wouldn't
just
want,
like
a laser necessarily. You want something that's gonna,
yeah,
tumble.
yep, create like physical damage inside the body.
So let's go to the second test. There's a moving foam target test with a horse that must be avoided and captured. Lucas, now you had something to say about this.
Yeah, I do.
Santiago gets 5 hits in 17 seconds without hitting the horse. He did have several non-lethals and misses. And then Moses also gets 5 hits in 21 seconds. A little bit longer.
Shooting one-handed like a pimp.
I didn't notice that.
That was the most half-assed, like, sloppy grip I've ever seen someone firing. Just like...
Yeah. So he also missed the horse. Before we get to the edge,
Missed the horse.
Dorian
He missed
asks,
everything else.
Dorian asked Fernando about how Pancho took care of his men. Fernando says that Pancho had at least one car in some of his trains as a dedicated hospital. And Dorian responds with his catchphrase, without a doubt, that has to be an X factor that we factor into our sim. How the fuck would that work?
What did that have to do with the test also? Like,
This crazy horse get like a train? Like, what's his home base? Like, what are we talking about? Like,
Yeah, like, does Pancho Villa get to bring his wounded to the medical tent and, like, heal them up? Like, he's got a healer on the team.
yeah.
You know?
And
he's
he
got
always
mercy.
says, this has to be an X factor that we factor into the sim. It's like, he says that, like, all season, but it's like, stop. Like, whatever. Maybe
There's
that's
another
what-
great Dorian line when he's going over the mannequins, and he says, that's gonna squirt, and he does a slight pause, and then he goes, like a spigot.
Oh, I love it. That's gonna squirt like a spigot.
So he's like, that's gonna squirt like a spigot.
he got that one through the spike sensors.
Spike TV,
But,
baby.
you know,
Yeah,
they're
I was
talking about the
watching, and
train. They're like,
Alyssa looked up and went, Dorian. And so in my notes, all I wrote next to that was, is it pee?
yeah, we don't know.
There's a debate.
Yeah.
Is it pee?
I like how they talk about that medical train or whatever that he has, and Dorian's like, we got to put in this X factor for Pancho Villa, and then Robert Daly's like, what do we call it? Dorian's like, how about Centaur of the North? And Robert Daly's like, all right, whatever you say. Whatever you say, Doc.
Can I present my conspiracy
Yes,
theory
please go
about
ahead.
this test? So they lay down the law. We're shooting these foam targets. Don't hit the fucking horse. I'm pretty sure they hit the horse a couple times. There's a couple shots that shows them, and they definitely hit that horse. Now, I have a conspiracy theory. One, when they're reviewing the thing, there's that like white dot that's on the horse that definitely looks like a bullet hole to me. And then later when they were reviewing the horse again, there's definitely a second bullet hole. But here's my conspiracy theory. Someone shot the horse by accident. They had the intro already filmed and they're like, well, we don't have any brown paint to hide this like white bullet hole. So we're going to reshoot the intro now. And they had them all stand around because the white dot is on the horse whenever they do the intro. That's my conspiracy theory. They shot the horse.
Now, Lucas, are you telling me this show might have faked this test?
Yes. There's definitely like at least one time that the mannequin is going and it's right in front of the horse and you watch them fire and you're like, okay, that went like right through the horse.
Also, did you like how this is related to what you're talking about? For the ballistics gel test, they fucking strapped those guns to the table and had them pull a string because those guys cannot shoot. Like, neither of them can shoot, so it's like they saw what they did with the rifles and they're like, let's just tape this fucking thing to the table.
Go ahead, hit the ballistics. Get a little closer.
Yeah. By the way, I googled Centaur of the North. Centaur of the North is a collection of short stories linked by common words, plot elements, and themes that are famous in like the South Texas area. And the connection with Pancho Villa is that Pancho Villa was styled the Centaur of the North because of his campaigns on horseback in northern Mexico. So
obvious X factor.
I'm sure and if it's with mythology, he's probably involved in a lot of that. So, you know.
Right.
Naturally.
I, for one, agree with your conspiracy, Lucas. So the Edge goes to the 1873. I don't even know whose that is, to be honest, because they're so similar. Matt,
it's Crazy Horses.
Okay.
They had to give him something.
Yeah. So Mac
Right.
actually makes a good point that the Beasley is more maneuverable and uses the same round as the rifle. So that is a logistic that actually might take place or, come into play in a one-on-one fight.
Is this the one where like they come into the thing, he goes, I don't care. Beasley still won.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
like a defector. Yeah. So Dorian and Jeff disagree because, quote, more damage, because it's Deadliest Warrior. This is a perfect example of asking how deep you want the show to go with certain stuff. You can't simultaneously factor in Crazy Horse's potential hunger and rheumatoid arthritis while also taking a pistol solely because it does more damage. You have to pick a lane, and they don't.
Yeah, you said it.
So, anyone have anything else?
Ask me about his medical train.
You have something on that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Pancho Villa did use long trains to transport his soldiers from city to city when he was part of the Federale army. On top of these cars rode pigs, chicken, children, and women. Stick them on top, I guess, so you don't have to hear him bitch. He did have a hospital train. And each of these trains was about 40 enameled boxcars, and at least one of them was always a medical train, and it was staffed with Mexican and U.S. physicians that were supplied with surgical applications.
Wait. I'm just picturing. There's like a soldier. He's like, got a bullet wound. It's looking bad. And nurse is like, it doesn't look good, doc. What do you think? It's just one of the chickens with like a stethoscope. He's walking in. He's like,
he needs an ear nail.
Yeah.
Here's something else. I got this off a website. It could be BS. I don't know, but I thought it was funny when I read it. Famously, when they were making plans inside of the trains, every single time he would sit in blue boxers while he talked to his generals, which was kind of funny. He would just get in his underwear and he would sit there while he made his plans for battle.
That's me talking to you guys on Xbox back in the day. It was like, we're talking about Deadliest Warrior, the new Halo. But yeah, thank you for the Lucas's medical train corner.
Apparently, when he had the supplies, he used trains. That was real.
Yeah, I will say the edges are so obviously like rigged from the beginning. Like, we're gonna give the rifle to Pancho, then we're gonna give the pistol to Crazy Horse so that it's not too one-sided, because the knife in the club doesn't really matter. But at least they gave the pistol the edge based on something we fucking saw. All right. Not something they pulled out of their ass at the last minute.
Even though they're the same pistol.
Right. Well, listen, I have to stick up for my guy here. All right. This episode. This is some of the, when I said there's good and bad, this is some of the bad in this fucking episode.
Yeah. Well, so let's go on to the Max Chalk Talk, which we kind of get back to back. First, we got Pancho Villa. They take us through the Battle of Torreon, and they say that Pancho's tactics are called El Golpe Terrifico, also known as the terrific blow, as we've established. And it appears
the throat goat.
Right. It appears to use some kind of stock footage that we've now identified from a movie, The Church Exploding. I think that is a movie called Pancho Villa starring himself or something like that. But anyway, anything about El Golpe Terrifico?
Well, El Golpe Terrifico. It was kind of funny. The first thing that comes up when you type this in is obviously Deadliest Warrior Wikipedia. The second thing I found was a Prezi presentation for someone, and it looked like a high school project they submitted, and they used Deadliest Warrior as their references.
That's
and
awesome.
that was the only thing I found referencing this. Couldn't find any other stuff using this terminology, but what it does, what they're talking about on the show, is the Second Battle of Torreon, which lasted Orléans, which lasted from March 21st to April 2nd, 1914. And it was just an example of battle tactics. To sum it up, essentially the revolutionaries just used nightfall to enclose the enemy within the city and launched attacks in 8 waves that kind of just ruined the Federal soldiers' night and ended up defeating them in the end, just using nightfall. I mean, it's been done before. It'll be done again. If you want to read more about the battle, it is kind of crazy. The army that he was facing had like 8,000 casualties, and he only suffered like 1,500 casualties or something. So, I mean, there was definitely some tactics going on there that he did right. But I don't know if they just made that up for the show, if that's what it actually goes by, but I did not find anything else with that El Golpe Terrifico.
Okay. So I have an unpopular opinion. Let's hand it over to the throat goat himself and Matt. I'll give my opinion after we talk about Crazy Horse. So Crazy Horse, his tactics are described as hit and run, and they take us to the Battle of Rosebud Creek. So Matt, do you want to take us away?
The hit and run, just another form of the constantly reused feigned retreat that is literally in every single episode of season 3. So the Battle of Rosebud Creek was adjacent to the Battle of Little Bighorn. This was the Americans trying to bring reinforcements to General Custer. And what they talked about on there is more or less, I didn't have much to add from what I was reading. Like, just basically using, this is like guerrilla warfare tactics, like in, out, in, just attacking different angles and sort of overwhelming the enemy and making them retreat because communication breaks down and they don't know which side to go to. And I don't know. The way Mac talked about it was, I didn't have that much to add to it.
That's kind of how I was with mine, too. I was like, if you just watch the episode, you get the gist of what the battle was about. There's nothing I could really add to it.
Let me give you my unpopular opinion. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm sure people will. I feel like battle tactics and generalship is one of, at least in terms of Deadliest Warrior, how they present it, is way less limited and limitless and complicated as people would think. So many of these great generals' battle strategies are hit and run, feigned retreat, ambush,
Nighttime.
Nighttime. Like, I feel like there's only so many ways to crack an egg, and like, how many more? Like, you think there's like these complicated things of push just coming here, we're gonna like all this crazy stuff. And I understand they're trying to dumb it down for like a 20-second segment, but I feel like the tools of a general are a lot more limited than one might think.
Yeah, I mean, they want you to. They want it to be like a Trojan horse thing, where you're like, "Oh my God, that's such a genius idea. That's how they won. They hid in a horse and gifted it to the city."
Yeah, I feel like there's more complexity when I'm trying to counterpick an Overwatch. Like I'm like, okay, we could do this, or in Siege, like okay, let's do this, and then like, so Siege I'm saying is more complicated than real life warfare. It's basically my point.
Naturally.
It's also they're stuck in this difficult place because on one hand they want to keep it historical, so they pick a specific historical example, but the problem is all of those examples are always with armies because these guys that they pick are generals of larger groups of men, whereas this show is 5-on-5. Like if Crazy Horse only has 5 guys, is the hit and run tactic going to be like, is he going to be able to hit, the flank and then hit here and then retreat? Like, especially if it's in just an open fucking field, like they shoot the battle. Like,
can you guys wait till nighttime?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Or when they're in the volcano or Mars, any of those other ones, it's definitely not going to work.
Right, when they're fighting in the Arctic tundra. Yeah, Battlefield Tactics is like, I feel like they were hoping for like, like, oh, Tyrion Lannister sets the Blackwater on fire with wildfire to counter Stannis's fleet.
Right.
But then they get into it and they pick the warriors and it's like, is there like a really cool moment that, all of these really boil down to like a bold move,
that paid off.
Just charging in there or like retreating and hitting and running away and hitting and running away, because that's just like a good tactic for anybody basically, period.
Yeah.
Like,
right, don't disagree. Edge, Crazy Horse, who cares?
I wrote in my notes, it's his consolation prize.
Yeah, right.
We've said normally they give Battlefield Tactics to the guy that's going to lose. That's all it is. It is a masquerade of like, oh, we've made the show more advanced or more historically accurate, but it's really just the second place trophy that they hand out. Like, yes, your guy lost, but he's the better tactician by 4 points in our sim, whatever that means.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into it. So next we have the bolo knife. Stats are a length of 18 inches, I should say short range. Oh, wait, no. Fuck, I did this out of order. Short range, first is the Inyan Kapemni club. Stats for that: length of 24 inches, weight 1.5 pounds, made of wood, bauxite, and rawhide. Get a little showcase by Dave Baker. And anything interesting on this club?
I just want to say one thing before Matt takes it. From the very second I saw this thing on screen, I just went, that thing's going to fucking break.
Yeah. How the fuck do you spell this thing? Cut this out. Let's see if it has the Deadliest Warrior curse. I am curious.
There's no way it doesn't.
Oh, it does. Yep. So, okay. All right. Cut me back in here. Yeah, so it's a war club. I mean, it's very similar. It's funny you mentioned that, Lucas, because in the I think, not in the Comanche episode, but the Apache episode, they have a war club as well, and that breaks in a very, like, the same way that this club breaks, because it's just, like, tied on with rawhide, and yeah, as soon as you see it, you're like, that thing's breaking.
It's like the thickness of, like, a human hair, and, like, and you're like, there's no way that doesn't break.
Yeah.
It's interesting, but I think I talked about in the Apache episode, like, this weapon might be more appropriate, but for the show, I think it would have been cooler for them just to have, like, one of those horse jawbone clubs that's just like a solid piece of bone. Just primitive and savage, and it would be so funny watching somebody take a horse jaw and beat a ballistic gel to death with it.
Right. So, to get into the test real quick, Delano beats the shit out of a gel torso. Not much to it. The club actually breaks, as we mentioned. Dorian says that it's a killing weapon when it strikes the skull. Anywhere else, it just hurts a lot. And you can tell that Mac says that Delano lost accuracy when he unleashed with the club. And all I could think of, I mentioned this when we were rewatching it, this is something that like you and your friends would hit each other in like the backyard, like a barbecue, like fucking around, you know, you'd be like find something at like your uncle's and then just let's start whipping. Like, does not seem like a deadly weapon. But what is like the head of it? Is it like a...
Probably bone, right?
What did Dave Baker say?
If it's bauxite, then that's a rock type of mineral.
Yeah. Yeah, it says wood, bauxite, and rawhide. So the top has got to be the rock.
Well, I still wouldn't want to get hit with that nowadays, but I stand by that. I'm sure I whipped someone with something similar to the Inyakapemni, my cousin or something.
I wouldn't want to be hit with this thing in the head, but this is a test between, like, you look at this club and then you look at the bolo knife and you're like, well, I wonder which one's going to get the edge. Like, bolo knife. And the bolo knife's not even cool or interesting. It's just like,
knife.
Unless Lucas has some crazy
That's what
history
you think.
It's just like a machete you buy at Walmart. And
well, let's get in real quick to the bolo
there's
knife.
no denying that it's a superior, like, killing weapon.
Right. So stats real quick. Length of 18 inches, weight 1.5 pounds, wood and steel. And do you want to give us anything about the bolo knife, Lucas?
Yeah, it auto-corrected to Ebola knife, which should have been way different.
Nice.
The bolo espresso knife.
But that's got to be factored into the sim.
Oh, yeah.
Under disease.
Definitely. Disease. The bola is just the general term for pre-colonial small to medium single-edged sword or large knife that originated out of the Philippines. Essentially, it's just compared to a machete. It's very similar, where it's a tool and a weapon in one. It's been used in a ton of conflicts, very readily available, as it was essentially, at its heart, a farming tool in many Spanish-speaking countries. The bolo knife was actually adopted by the U.S. military in 1897 to 1918 and remained as kind of like a bush clearing tool. They're commonly used in Filipino martial arts as well. Couldn't find any direct evidence, like, you know, a museum piece or something of this was Pancho Villa's bolo knife, but most likely, whether it was a tool or an actual weapon, he probably carried one with him. He grew up working on an estate, which is where these things were pretty common, with just like the farming folk. Yeah, that's about it. Not sure if it was actually really, if there's any like notable times that a bolo knife was used in conflict, but it's literally just like, it's like me saying knife.
Right.
Yeah, I forgot to mention on the record that the Income Penye has the Deadliest Warrior curse.
I think you might have said that.
Well, off the record.
I'm gonna leave that in. Don't worry.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's everything that pops up when you search it. It's just Deadliest Warrior.
Right. So we get another Dave Baker demo where I pointed this out when we were watching. In the background of his little workshop, he has these little sketches that look like the Vitruvian Man of like a muscular arm and like a weapon. And I really can't tell if they're like fake or not. Like he actually drew that out. I feel like they are fake.
I said it looked like that art you get when you pre-ordered like the Ultimate Edition of like some RPG
Yeah,
game.
like the Elder Scrolls or something. Yeah, I'll put it in. But yeah, and Santiago cuts the shit out of a gel torso. Not really much to say.
And they do tons of sound effects of like...
They do. In discussing the edge, Dorian says that Inyakapemni actually has to hit in your brainy to cause death.
Inyakapemni, you gotta hit in your brainy to actually cause a death.
Listen, what the fuck was that?
Egregious. Dorian is egregious this episode.
Has to hit your brainy. The fuck?
In your brainy.
Edge bolo knife. No one in the right mind's can disagree with that.
No.
Maybe too with
Now,
Crazy Horse.
if Lucas was on Team Crazy Horse, he would argue.
I would have come up with some
against
BS argument.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if we
He
got
would
there.
have been like, but if you think about it, the bolo knife might glance off your T-shirt.
Yeah. I'd rather it actually limits your options, so you're more focused in on what you wanna do.
I do got to put it now because I think it was during the handgun segment and we skipped over it. At 19 minutes and 41 seconds, one of the actors trips over the barrier that they have set up, and it looks so hilarious to me. We
Yeah,
got to put that in.
I know. I'm glad you brought that up. I almost forgot. I'm pretty sure it's unintentional.
The other, let that clip play. Oh, it's playing right now. Oh, there he is. He just tripped. The other thing I had to put in is it was like a fever dream, and I had to confirm that it was actually there when everyone was here. They reused the Taliban footage also, and it's when they're talking about Crazy Horse's backstory.
Oh, during Crazy Horse's backstory, it's not just Taliban footage. They put in as many episodes as they possibly can.
Yeah, but it's the
IRA.
It's the RPG shot where they're in that building.
Yeah, it is that same RPG
Fucking-
because that's what I saw it and I was like, no way.
Yeah. IRA, Taliban, Viet Cong,
best of.
as if the IRA, the lookouts they have are standing around the shack and they're like, yeah, so I was reading about this Crazy Horse fellow. He did these hit and run tactics.
But I had to mention those while I was thinking about them right now because that has to make it in because that's my life, just watching Deadliest Warrior in slow speed so I can pick up on every stupid
If you didn't say that, I would have cut in with a little voiceover because it's so good. Okay, let's go to X Factors.
Yeah, no more delay.
Yeah.
Let's get to the creme de la creme.
So, logistics. Pancho is given an 87, and Crazy Horse is given a 54. And I said, yikes, because he scavenges. Like, he has to scavenge for resources.
Isn't it 87 like what they gave like modern like U.S. military teams also?
Probably. Yeah, there's no consistency.
I'm actually checking this out right now. Yeah, so George Washington got a 73 in logistics, and Napoleon Bonaparte got a 79.
Well,
So
Pancho would kick his
Villa
ass.
better logistics than either of those armies, I guess. I don't know.
Right. And the difference is just egregious also. I mean, it's not even really like an indictment of what they say with Crazy Horse. They say because he has to scavenge. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about these guys to really make the determination, but that seems like a huge disparity.
Yeah, I mean, Pancho Villa led part of the Federal Army of Mexico at some point, but they heavily relied on supplies from the United States to like fund their army and like with weaponry. So I wouldn't call that the best supplied army.
And this whole like logistics thing, we debated it. Obviously, Mac makes mention of, oh well, the pistol and the rifle have the same round, so in case you need to reload, and
That's genius.
it just opens up a can of worms. It opens up a can of worms about this whole thing, how this whole thing operates. Like, do the Warriors have limited ammunition in the fight? It also opens up the can of worms that neither of these guys, being guerrilla fighters, have a set kit. They don't have a set kit, so that disadvantage of Crazy Horse and his men not having the same round for the rifle and pistol is the show's fault. Like, then pick a different thing, because it's a disadvantage that they're giving him that is their fault for giving.
I'm honestly, I'm fine with Crazy Horse's 54 because I'm not on his team. But I think Pancho should have got like, I would say like 68 would have been like, or 69. Gotta get 69. Would have been like a fair number.
I really don't have a problem with Pancho getting because I guess I don't know enough about the whole Pancho Villa thing. If he does have a train of supplies coming with him, that really says something. And you know what? The Crazy Horse, I mean, he is scavenging for stuff, and he's, I mean, they lose because they don't have enough supplies, basically, enough food. But The entire idea, like when they brought on logistics for Washington and Napoleon, it seemed less weird because these are guys that commanded big armies. It feels weird to me that like Pancho Villa, like, are they saying he had a conventional fighting force then, or is it just a bunch of rebels? Like,
he did. Like, that's what it comes into, like, what point of his life are you looking at? Because there was a time when he was a brigadier general of, like, a federal army, but then there was a time where he was leading a band of guerrilla warriors of, you know, those 200 of them, and they were raiding Texas bases to just get supplies.
Right, and with the Napoleon episode, one of the criticism I had there is similar to your criticism now, Lucas, which is like Napoleon has like a C in logistics, but they're taking him at the time where they're specifically cherry picking for that stat, Napoleon being overextended into Russia, which is not even the era of like the battle they're picking for the episode. You know what I mean? So with this, it's the same thing. Like, which crazy horse are we cherry picking here? Because his logistics were probably at their very best at the beginning of the Sioux War, you know, which is the time period they seem to be encapsulating. So I don't know. I don't necessarily disagree. This is the whole thing about this episode. I know I'm on Team Crazy Horse. My personal bias, I rooted for him then. I rooted for him watching it again. I think he should have won personally. Putting all of that bias aside and looking at like what we're presented, it's not the biggest deal in the world that Pancho Villa beats him. You know what I mean? I was not like, what, are you serious? This is insane, you know, compared to some of the other results we've gotten this season. Because these guys are contemporaries. They have very similar weapons. And, you know, but there's a chance Pancho Villa comes out on top.
Just the fact that his weaponry, and he was just alive, you know, a little bit later, it's probably just enough to win on its own. He has a little bit newer technology.
Some of the stuff that they cover in this episode and so the reasons classic season 3 fashion were given like at the very last minute, you know, I'm struggling to pause it in time to get the numbers for the X Factor.
Dude, that happened. There's one of the X Factors. It's on the screen for half a second. I rewound it like 6 times trying to like, I think it's it's the next one. We're going to do the disease one. It's on the screen. It's like, and then it's gone. And I kept trying to pause it.
It's amazing because they obviously fill up the whole episode with the weapons test because they're far more interesting than the like 4 guys sitting around the table talking about their nerd X Factors. but like those X Factors, that segment comes and goes in like 2 minutes, but that's the whole episode. Like if you care about the outcome at all, which I guess you're a sucker for doing, you know, like me, if you care about the outcome at all, like the whole episode's determined right there. And it's like if you got up to get like a freaking drink from the fridge while not hitting pause, like you would have missed the whole thing and come back and been like, logistics?
Yeah.
What?
If you got a terrific blow, you probably would have missed it.
Right.
I mean,
don't be so sure. If it's from the throat goat,
right.
Yeah, if it's from the throat goat, it's gonna be, you know, over like that.
That is, I think, rewatching season 3. You're like hitting the nail on the head of my least favorite thing of season 3. Is it's determined by these X Factors, and they're such a tiny segment on the show, but it's what determines the entire outcome.
Yeah. Well, let's finish the X Factors first, and we'll get into all that stuff. So, disease, I have the most to say about this one. So, Pancho gets a 44, Crazy gets a 73.
44? What is he, like? Is he crippled? Like,
well, so a few things.
Sick and dying.
Right.
Crazy Horse is rated low because he almost got smallpox and tuberculosis. Again, okay.
Almost.
He almost got a lot of things. Pancho is rated lower because he had arthritis and insomnia, pretty sure neither of those are diseases.
Dude gets an F- because his joints are a little sore. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like walking corpse.
Yeah.
And Robert Daly also says 44 is really low. That's almost 50%.
Well, he says, he's like, we have to give him really low. It's like, why?
So is 10% like a chick's sick child in the hospital?
I
Like,
guess.
how?
What am
44
I?
is so
Yeah.
low. It's almost
Again,
half.
what's the
I
scale
have
here?
insomnia and a little bit of arthritis now. What am I? Like a 42?
What's 100? Is it just a white blood cell?
Yeah.
It's like the only thing that gets 100 in disease.
Brendan, what do you think you are? Disease?
I have no clue. I don't even know.
Brendan, you look like an 83 to me, Brendan.
I don't know. Well, the allergies.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and the
Oh,
COVID.
you're like a 20 then, according to this scale.
Yeah.
Guys, an 83, don't be fucking ludicrous. Brendan gets an 84, clearly. Okay.
That's an
Let's
X
be
factor.
real
He's
here.
wearing a mask. That is an X factor we have to put in.
Oh, yeah. Gotta put
Yes.
that in.
Right.
All
Okay, let's
right,
just move
but-
past that. Battlefield
So,
tactics.
logistics, how do you apply it? Disease, even dumber somehow, even more irrelevant to the conversation.
But again, like, disease almost implies it's like communicable. Arthritis and insomnia are not diseases.
Yeah, can I talk about those for a second too?
Sure.
I want to.
What if he got a good night's sleep the night before though?
Right.
Like,
What if he gives Crazy Horse arthritis?
What if he gives them a terrific blow? So as many as you know, arthritis is maybe a disease. It causes joints to become inflamed, which causes pain and stiffness, which can worsen with age. Not a 44. I found one other website also. So, like, did he actually have this? There was only one other website besides the Deadliest Warrior Wikipedia that even talked about him having arthritis. And from the way it sounds, it didn't affect him that much. He won so many battles. He was, he's not bedridden. The only other tidbit of information I could find is in those medical carts that he traveled, he had some type of medication that he took for his supposed arthritis. This is off that other website that I found that might be a little bit BS, but they're like, he carried medication to treat his arthritis, so he was good. He's good.
Went to the pharmacy on his train. Yeah, that's...
hey, you know what medicine he had for his arthritis was tequila with a lime chaser. Am I right, boys?
If you have a chance to try Pancho Villa tequila, Matt, since you're down south again, I know they sell it down there. It's pretty good. $10 a bottle.
Maybe I'll bring some home when I come visit.
Yeah, I honestly wish I had one to like just set on the table
'Cause
for the
it would
show.
be a cool set decoration.
Yeah, for the
Add
last
the
two
Pancho Villa.
episodes.
Yeah, they call it Pancho Villa tequila because it's more than your joints that'll be stiff that night.
Yeah, well, that's the cure.
Anyway, let's keep it going. Battlefield tactics, 85, 81. Who cares?
Yeah,
and then,
I honestly I don't even care about
Yeah.
this X Factor at this point. It's close enough. Sure,
Yeah.
whatever.
and then the X Factor, the hidden X Factor,
Yep.
Audacity.
Audacity.
Pancho gets a 91. Crazy Horse gets an 84. What the fuck are we doing?
My what I'm recording my audio on right
I
now.
was trying to formulate a joke about like how they recorded the voices.
Right.
Yeah. Skills with Audacity. Crazy Horse gets a B and Pancho Villa gets an A. Sure. I don't know. Again, they didn't even cover it. They just threw it in at the end. And
They
they're
don't even
like,
cover what it
Audacity.
means.
It's like those hidden X Factors. They run the sim and they're like, oh my God, look what was in here. Audacity. We had no idea.
Don't forget
Bro,
they have to
go.
run every previous simulation again with these new X Factors in it.
Who put this Centaur of the North in here?
Yeah, how does Centaur of the North affect the sim? I always try to like apply it to like how would you apply it to an RTS game?
Yeah. Oh, what if
Like-
that was a question on the Aftermath? Oh my God. That would have been
Centaur
so
of
good.
the North.
Yeah.
Dorian,
Like
how did you factor in Centaur of the North? How did that factor
Yeah.
into a Pancho Villa's victory?
Does it? God damn it! Does it make Crazy Horse like more afraid, or something? Like, would he have a lower morale because Pancho Villa is so legendary on horseback, or like, did he hear some bedtime stories about Pancho Villa and he's like a little nervous?
Right.
Just don't ask him to like touch his toes though.
I heard this guy's basically a centaur.
Stiff
Crazy
centaur.
Horse who, spoiler, not a bad horse rider. If we're gonna put that out there, pretty good on horseback.
A centaur with arthritis is like your level 1 mount in like an MMORPG. This is, yeah, he's not upgraded yet. Okay.
I'm ready for the reenactment.
Yeah, let's go. Let's get into it, Lucas.
Alrighty, The Sim. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another fantastic battle simulation where Pancho Villa will battle Crazy Horse. I, Season 3, am your Grand Sim Master, Lucas. And damn, we are getting close to the end. I don't get many more of these, so gotta enjoy it while I'm doing it. It almost brings a tear to my eye.
Almost.
But I'm a man. We've entered in the warriors. We've entered in their weapons. We've entered in the X Factors. We've entered in heaps and heaps of bullshit. Nothing left to do now but run the sim. So go ahead and raise those fingers. Raise those little fingies. And I want to smash that enter key. I want it in pieces. So, we open up on Pancho Villa, slicing open a juicy pomegranate and eating it just like an animal. Him and the boys just straight chilling.
What's with him and eating the fruit?
I don't know. Like pomegranates, don't you like take the things out too and like eat them? He like cuts it in half and just like there's like juice dripping down.
Was he notorious fruit eater?
Notorious fruit eater and throat goat, Pancho Villa.
It's because he has arthritis. He can't. He's just gotta get in there.
Yeah.
So him and the boys are just straight chilling when off in the distance, Crazy Horse comes rolling up. Crazy Horse and his boys post up on a hill and spot Pancho Villa just barely about 50 feet away. Pancho Villa looks over his shoulder, and the tension is so thick in the air right now, you can cut it with a knife. No one gets that.
Shout out.
Crazy Horse gives a yell, which signifies the start of our 5-on-5 battle. Crazy Horse and his guys start charging in, while Pancho and his men collect their weapons. Just then, one of Pancho's men lets out a cry and starts charging towards Crazy Horse. You know this guy's gonna fucking die. Hopefully he gets a kill first. Meanwhile, both teams are shooting at each other with their rifles, missing every shot after they factored in that fantastic shooting from our tests earlier. Then, one takes out the world's most accurate handgun and kills one of Crazy Horse's men. Just then, our guy who took off on his horse gets gunned down and still has that 0 KD. That hurts. We get some back and forth firing as Crazy Horse is riding in on one of those fast and furious runways that just doesn't end, even though they started 50 feet apart. There's like firing. They cut back. He's firing. Pancho's team saddles up and rides away, and Crazy Horse does a Fortnite dance like they already won the battle. But then they realize they still have to give chase, and we get the obligatory shot of the bird flying over with the caw. Suddenly, Crazy Horse and his boys are in stealth mode. At least they thought they were, till one of them takes a bullet straight to the head. Then just leaning out of cover like it's Rainbow Six Siege, one of Pancho Villa's guys gets their eyeball shot out in this really dumb CGI shot. Then we cut over to Pancho Villa as he tucks down behind a tree, puts a bullet right between one of Crazy Horse's guys. We get some more back and forth firing behind the trees while reloading, and one of Pancho Villa's guys gets shot. He's literally standing behind the tree reloading, and they just don't explain the shot at all. Did the guy shoot through the tree? Is that Crazy Horse like hiding in the bushes?
Yeah, so what happened was he got shot, and then they took him to the medical train cart to heal up. So he was out of commission.
He got 100 HP.
But, like,
he got all his HP back.
Yeah, but like if Pancho Villa had been killed, this guy could have theoretically come back and killed Crazy Horse. So
Also, where's Poncho's train just driving through the middle of the battlefield? I want to see that. They like don't give any context to where that guy dies from though. He's hiding behind a tree, and all you can see is the guys firing from the other side of the tree, and he just goes. Anyways, Crazy Horse runs out of bullets at this point, and we get the like click 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 shot. So he switches over to his battle club, but not fast enough because his last guy gets stabbed with a bolo knife from behind. He runs to regroup with Pancho, but runs right past him, straight into a juke from Crazy Horse. And the last Pancho Villa guy gets smacked in the back of the head for a death blow. 1v1. How it always ends up. Why don't they just do 1v1 like the old season?
yeah, that's gonna squirt.
Poncho's about to end it right here, except he's out of ammo. So now it's club versus bolo knife. Pancho gets a cut on Crazy Horse, and he falls over. But before he can finish it, Crazy Horse rolls out like a sneaky little snake. He comes in, but realizes his battle club is broken, and takes a bolo knife to the stomach. And with a cry of Victoria, Pancho Villa is our winner.
Damn.
Winner, Pancho Villa.
Yeah.
Winner, chicken dinner.
What is my win percentage up to? I gotta be pretty high.
Better than mine, probably.
I'll have to calculate for the end of the season what all our winner percentages were.
We need like the end of the show total win and loss percentages.
Right. The Aftermath in terms of where it ranks on like the tier list, I could say middle of the pack. I mean, nothing really funny happens. It's not terrible.
Slightly racist? Can I say that?
Yeah, you caught something?
I mean, just a lot of guys going on.
I didn't pick up on
from
that.
both sides.
I actually didn't pick up on. I'll have to check it out, but
Just a lot of it. So
yeah,
I just was sitting there and I was like, this might be a little much.
right.
But I'm not.
Who are we? We're the bad
Yeah.
guys. So we have no place to talk with either of these warriors. So let's just keep it moving. Okay, where are we at?
Aftermath.
Results.
This results. Thank you. So the winner's Pancho Villa. Stats wins Crazy Horse wins 2,316 to Pancho Villa's 2,684. So a 54 to 46% win to Pancho Villa, which I feel like is pretty high. Weapon effectiveness, the Henry gets 46 to Winchester's 54. The Colt, the 54% to the Colt Beasley's 46. And the Inyang Kapemni, 42 to the Bull Knife's 58. Robert said that Crazy Horse didn't have enough supplies to win. What the fuck? How many supplies you need on a 5-on-5 fight?
He didn't have scavenger on.
Right. And Robert then says,
Crazy Horse just did not have the supplies that Pancho Villa did. Pancho Villa's logistics were much stronger than Crazy Horse's, who was scavenging mostly off the battlefield. For example, you would go, oh, disease is going to play a major factor. But then you go, oh, but Pancho Villa has a medical supply train.
and I said, I cannot begin to unpack how dumb that is to say that.
Yeah. Are we, before we roll into the aftermath, my only note about the results, I had two things that I wrote. So the stats for the rifles and pistols are just swapped. Like,
I did notice that. Yeah.
they're both 54 to 46, just swapped a different way. So was one range more important than the other? My guess would be that the rifle got more kills, but we're not told. Or did the bolo win it for Mr. Villa? The fact that he had a knife against a club, did that win it for him? I tend to lean more, and obviously the results are fake, but in what their intention is, I tend to lean more into the idea that the rifles probably got more kills than the other weapons, and so having an edge there
Means more.
yeah, well, it's percentage-wise accurate. See, this is interesting. similar to what we were talking about with the Henry and the Winchester, how they had the same hit rate percentage, but one was 6 kills and the other was 4. Bring it into this. That difference between the Winchester and the Henry in the total results was significant enough to like push it over. And I'm sure having the edge with the Bolo didn't hurt.
Yeah. Well, that's what another thing that I think I said it before. I don't like these percentages that they present on season 3 at the end, because it doesn't give the tail of the tape as well as just giving us the numbers does.
Yeah, and the numbers obviously had some goofy stuff that happened before, but it does, those numbers, it shows you what weapon got the most kills, what range was like the most crucial to the two warriors, like where did most of the kills accumulate. If you think about like the Mafia Yakuza episode, isn't it like the Tommy gun gets like over 50% of the total kills, or the Tommy gun gets right around 50% of the total kills in the whole fucking episode. In this, it wouldn't showcase that. The Tommy gun would have had like, 50 or 60 some percent to the Sten's 30 or 40 some percent, and then the rest of the weapons would have been listed there. But it's really not telling you the tail of the tape of, hey, the most important one was the Tommy gun, because it got like, it almost gave the Mafia the win by itself, basically.
Yeah, but you're forgetting the most important fact is that Disease killed way more than any of these weapons. Right. So the weapons, they were probably 5% of the fight. In most of the scenarios, Crazy Horse probably just got like tuberculosis before they even met up and died, and then.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is they make a lot of talk about Disease on this episode, but when they put the kill totals, I didn't see it on there.
Okay.
So was the arthritis, like, did that just affect Pancho and that had slowed him down in the computer? Or
his speed stat was like 0.8.
Yeah, he had like a speed penalty. It's like when you get poisoned in Skyrim or something, your stats get penalized. Like, I don't know. I'm putting more thought into it than they did. So, whatever.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the aftermath, shall we? So, unfortunately, this is the last aftermath. Now, there is an aftermath for a live aftermath. It's a little bit different as Zombies vs. Vampires. But this is the last normal aftermath. Right? Because, and I'll get into this at the end of the episode, I forgot, Gurkhas vs. FFL premiered right before Zombies vs. Vampires. It was a back-to-back.
I forgot that too until I watched this.
Right. Yeah, so it's
and I was like, so this is almost like the penultimate episode in a way.
Right.
It's interesting.
And that's why it's the last normal aftermath. There isn't one for FFL and Gurkhas. So the panel is Santiago, Moses, and Armand. Moses says that while he was upset by the loss, says that there's no way that an X Factor in the sim can represent spirituality. Kieran then asked Dorian if they can measure spirituality, which I don't understand. I understand he's the only person from the show, like, the only regular from the show on this panel, but he always gets these sim questions, I feel like. And so Dorian polishes a turd by saying that they consider adding spirituality in the sense of having a calling to a higher power, then says logistics played the bigger role. So I don't know. They said they kind of included it. Just say no.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just another way of saying, because what is spirituality factoring into the fight? It's like a morale thing. And, Crazy Horse is riding into battle. Who knows if he believes it or not, but to some degree he believes it, and his men believe it, that this man is blessed and like he can't be killed in battle. And he wasn't, to his credit. So the factor that, the only thing I can think of really is morale. Like that would make you more motivated to fight behind a figure, or I mean, it affects the men more than anything. Like the troops following him, I feel like, unless Crazy Horse truly believes it, then it affects him too. But yeah, I don't know. It reminded me very much of a million other episodes where people have just put that in a different way. Like, oh yeah, William Wallace beat Shaka, but Shaka, if the sim doesn't have a way to account for Shaka's fierceness, or something like that. Like,
yeah.
he just would have found a way. And it's like, you're right, but this is a show where we plug stats into a computer game.
Right. Well, so moving on, a couple interesting insights into the show. So there's kind of an awkward joking moment where Moses says that after the episode aired, he was looking for Santiago at the airport after Pancho Villa won, to beat him up or something.
Gonna kick his ass.
Yeah, and they kind of it's kind of an awkward joke. But a couple interesting tidbits that we can infer from this. So one, it reinforces the idea that the episode is taped before they know who wins, and that is consistent.
Yep.
Which is interesting. And also that Spike flew the experts out to LA just to record a 20-minute aftermath episode.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Honestly.
I mean, if you got to burn some budget.
Business. Yeah.
It's so cool.
Instead of just doing Skype or whatever. So I thought that was interesting.
What if they invited them on, but they didn't pay for their plane ticket? They were like, you can come on, but you got to get your own transportation.
There'd be some pretty empty aftermaths.
Right?
Yeah.
A viewer asks if pain is an X factor, because certainly painful wounds that are not lethal would take someone out of the fight. Dorian tries to say it is an X factor, like everything else, but because you can still shoot, it, quote, plays a role, which means nothing.
Yeah.
Dorian,
it's not a factor because this is a computer game. They don't feel pain. Like,
your health bar goes.
Yeah, it's a stat in that you start running out of health and maybe your character moves slower or something, or maybe a limb gets damaged beyond the point of working, but they don't feel, I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's a weird, it feels like a little kid asked that question.
Well,
do they take pain into account though? You know how much that would fucking hurt?
and Dorian just lies. So I want to supercut every time Dorian says plays a role, factor into the sim, X factor certainly. He says it so much in this season.
Season 3 Dorian is just
he's a menace.
Yeah, he's just he's on something. He's wild and I don't want to say annoying, but it bugs me sometimes. The things he comes up with just has nothing to do with what's going on, and
he's out of fucks to give.
Yeah, it's pretty much what it boils
truly.
down to. It doesn't matter what he says. Yeah.
Right. On that topic, Dorian also says that in the ER, he gets patients who are so pumped with adrenaline, they don't know they're shot or don't realize how many times they're shot, and says that basically to disregard pain, which I'm not going to discredit his experience in the emergency room.
Yeah.
I mean, I could see that.
It's just a way to dismiss that question.
Yeah, I mean, there is that adrenaline where you don't feel pain because you're so hyped up.
But the Warriors aren't presumed to be on adrenaline during the entire fight. Just say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And he is right. You hear accounts about the account I was talking about earlier with the Islanders, where the U.S. troops were shooting them and they weren't going down, so they needed a bigger bullet. The troops were hey, we need a bigger bullet, and that's why they got the 1911. But it's one of those things where it's how do you account for that in the sim? Other than just, I don't even know, making it limb damage, or it's slowing the character down.
The sim's getting too complicated, and it needs to not be that complicated.
Yes,
it needs to be something dumb and simple.
If there's one recurring theme about season 3, it is that. The sim has always been mind-boggling, and I know it's because it's not real, so they just kind of make it what it is at any given time. But I feel in 1 and 2, they did not pretend nearly as much like what the sim takes into consideration.
Yeah. Instead of giving those definitive answers, yes, that's a X factor, I missed the vague answers where they would just steer the topic away and you didn't know shit about the sim. It was just this mysterious thing that, like, you know, 4 weapons get fed in and you get results out of it, and that's all you know. Like, there's none of this X factor
because
stuff. Yeah.
The sim at the end of the day is the Wizard of Oz. Like, the sim is the man pulling the strings behind the curtain, who is not, it's not some big sophisticated military simulation, right? It is like something you make in a coding class in college, like a D&D simulator or something like that. And it works better when they steer away from it and they don't put so much on it. By the end of season 3, you go back and you rewatch our podcast episodes, you listen to like what has been said about the sim, because I lock onto that fucking shit like a hawk locking onto a rat. Like, I'm reading into it and I'm like, by the end of season 3, you're dealing with like a sophisticated military AI is like running Deadliest Warrior, and it's like the other option is that they're making all of that up, and that just starts to seem, as it goes on, much and much more likely.
You're seeing the cracks in the foundation as it's starting to crumble apart.
It's no, I don't know.
No, I get you. Viewer then asks, why put a Gurkha versus a French Foreign Legion? And why not put the Gurkha versus the Russian Cossack? Which, I don't know who any of these people are. But for some reason, this is an extremely hot question that I've seen several times. I assume we'll get to it at French Foreign Legion, but people keep talking about these Cossacks like nothing else.
The Cossacks are definitely, they were popular at the time too. Like, this question is indicative of a lot of like the forums I saw where that was everywhere. Like, any list of potential warriors you ever got, like Russian Cossacks were always put on there. And I don't necessarily know that they're a better match against the Gurkhas, because they center that match around the Gurkhas, kind of, the next episode, in that they're the most relevant in World War II, and that's when that's the snapshot of time that they have the matchup in.
Okay. Wait, no spoilers, because I legit don't know who wins or who
I'm
these
not
people are.
saying anything.
So I'm excited
I'm
to
not
watch
spoiling anything for
an episode for the first time.
Yeah, me and Brandon started watching it when we originally got here today, and I'm like, I don't remember most of this episode, so that'll be like a fresh rewatch for me too.
What's interesting,
I remember liking it. It's got some cool guns in it, I think, and I remember going into that episode knowing who the French Foreign Legion was and having no clue what a Gurkha was, and ended up coming out of it like being like, oh, this is cool. I'm glad I learned about the Gurkhas, whoever these people are.
Yeah, it might end up being a decent episode.
Yeah,
it's a World War II episode, so it's got some World War II guns in it, which is probably what I like about it so much. So I don't know.
Well, Doran says that this is the most intense episode of Deadliest Warrior thus far, so ever. Say many more. Doran,
it's not. It's not.
Dorian then jokes that Zombie vs. Vampires is when his medical license goes out the door, and he'll have to beg for season 4. He'll become homeless. So,
well, how's he doing?
I hope you're watching this, Dorian. I'm sorry that year didn't work out for you, buddy.
You menace.
Right. And then they play a trailer for Gurkhas and Zombies, which I again forgot played back to back. The trailer teased a live aftermath. First off, they're like, a never before seen event in television history. We play 2 episodes back to back.
This Wednesday, Deadliest Warrior goes live with an unprecedented season finale event.
This has never been done on television before.
But it teased a live aftermath with a special surprise announcement, which I'm very curious to see what that is because we know it's not season 4.
We're canceled.
I wonder if it's kind of interesting. Like looking back, you can kind of see a nervous tension of. I mean, we're getting renewed, right?
I wonder if the contracts weren't obviously they weren't the renewed, but I wonder if that was they were wondering if their contracts were going to get renewed at that point, like it was in the air.
Maybe. I feel like it wasn't known at the time. There's no way.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's a game that gets announced, like DW Legends or something.
Was that out at this point though?
Well, it didn't have any season 3 Warriors, so I think Legends might have been out.
I
but
think
I'm not
it was
sure.
out at this point. Someone could fact check that later, but
Yeah. We'll see. Well, I'm curious.
whatever the announcement is, I'm curious what it is.
Too, yeah.
It sounds like it didn't come to fruition.
Right. And then last thing, they announced the winners of their art contest, which they're now all of a sudden doing. Now,
I loved that so much. I was like, what a snapshot of time if you are one of these like people that submitted the art and won.
yeah, at first I thought it was kind of goofy.
Love it.
But then you find out that the winners were sent a prop from the show.
Oh.
And I'm like, these are the luckiest people on the face of the earth.
Do you remember when they had the Sicilian axe for sale on that eBay that we found? You think that was one of the props someone was set and they're still trying to sell it on eBay?
Maybe, yeah. Well, I'll pose this question. Everybody, including Brendan, has to answer. You get 3 props from the show. What are you picking? Brendan, we'll start with you.
I don't know. I can't think of them off the top of my head.
We'll come back to you.
I'll go. I want a ballistic gel torso. I'm going to keep it in a freezer so it never goes bad.
Okay.
I want the E-tool. The E-tool that's used. And then I want the Spartan shield.
Oh, dude, that was gonna be one of mine. I
want the Spartan shield.
I'll change one of mine for that. I'll go next. I want Jeff's AK-47 T-shirt for starters.
Oh my! That is such a good pick.
Yeah, worn by him. I want the totally real, not an airsoft gun, FAMAS that they used. And I was gonna do the Spartan shield, but I gotta come up with something different. So I'm obviously gonna go with the blunderbuss used by the pirate.
Hell yeah. Good picks.
I am going to go with a chronometer, or chrony. I want to go with a battle bot.
The kill bot.
Kill bot, yes.
A blood ball.
And then last would be an RPG. Because the ATF can't regulate if you want it in our contest.
Yeah, but the one that goes...
yeah, the fun
On
RPG.
the line.
All right, Brennan. Anything come to mind? You can't repeat.
The Bird Club.
Oh, okay.
Ooh.
Max's jacket. One of them.
Oh, dude.
The suit jacket.
I would smell that every night before I went to bed.
Friend of the show.
Friend of the show.
I don't know. I would say one of the accelerometers or ballistic gel torso, but that was already taken.
How about I know what you're gonna get. A lock of Francis Brebner's hair.
That was what's it called. That was the other guy. Francis Brebner was the huge guy.
Oh, who was the other guy?
What about the Celts loincloth?
William Spencer Deneen.
William Spencer Deneen. That's right. Yeah. Celt loincloth. How about Susie the elephant?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, Susie the elephant.
Mr. Scholar, we have your delivery here. Shipping was $10 million.
And it smells like shit.
Brendan does not have a car. He just rides around on the elephant everywhere.
Right. Okay, this would be our 3, I think. Comment your 3, what you would pick.
Yeah,
and
that's
no
a good one.
copies, and you can't copy anyone else in the comment section. It's the rule. Okay. Oh, that's all I really got, gentlemen. Final thoughts. I don't really have any. Matt, you want to start us off?
Yeah, you go me first because I got the most probably. Some of this might be a little repeat, but I summarized it here. A lot is made about logistics and Pancho Villa having a greater supply chain, My first argument would be that is completely irrelevant to a 5-on-5, especially when we're taking the Warriors at their best, I'm assuming. My second argument would be that it is specifically stated in this episode, Crazy Horse fought opponents who had superior logistics to him and had a lot of success. There's also an argument made about Pancho Villa having superior training. That gets said more than once, but I don't recall that ever being covered in this episode. As far as we're told, Crazy Horse descends from a tribe of warriors, and Pancho Villa is just a bandit turned revolutionary. I'm not saying it's factually wrong, but it's another example of a recurring problem we have in Season 3 where shit is just pulled out at the last minute that decides the outcome. And straight up, for you guys, is it mentioned at all, like in the episode, that Pancho has like training that Crazy Horse doesn't? Is that because he's like in the federal army at one point or something?
I don't know if he ever received, like looking back at his story and everything I watched, I don't know if he ever received conventional training. I imagine just for the fact that he was part of federal army, he probably did some type of training, but not significant enough that it was.
Are they talking about the soldiers? Because they mention them by name when they say it. So it's like, I mean, Crazy Horse and his men were fighting trained government soldiers again. So it's like, not, in my mind, not like a good point as to why he would win. I don't think it's unthinkable that Pancho Villa could beat Crazy Horse, but I do have to disagree. I think 5-on-5, Crazy Horse and the Lakota tribesmen would come out on top because I think they're superior warriors. Even if you want to go off purely what's presented in this episode, we have a lever action rifle versus a lever action rifle, a revolver versus a revolver, and then a war club versus a machete. I don't think you can make an argument that either really has that significant of an edge in weaponry. Maybe they have a slight edge here and there. So that leaves the X factors. For a 5-on-5, I think tactics is a superior edge over logistics, whatever that means in terms of the sim. Is Crazy Horse running out of bullets in the middle of the sim? My closing thoughts are that this is a kind of a sloppy episode and a bit of a sleeper, but it is carried by how cool the warriors are and how charismatic the experts are. It's a fair matchup, and while I disagree with the outcome, I do agree in that it's close. I also think that Pancho Villa and Crazy Horse would much more likely be allies than enemies.
They do bring it up in the aftermath with Moses. He mentions that he was upset that Crazy Horse lost, but that it was somehow genetic brothers of Lakota tribesmen. I don't quite understand the genealogy, but he was pretty convinced that they were close genetic relatives of Crazy Horse.
and that was the sweet note I wanted to end everything on. You know, my pros and cons are basically pros with this episode is that the Warriors are cool. They just are. Cool is the right word. They have swag. And the experts are a lot of fun. I think the experts are cool and charismatic. Even if they're terrible at shooting, they are entertaining and knowledgeable, or at least come off as knowledgeable. And the cons of the episode are definitely that I think whoever was staging the weapon tests failed big time. Because, like, you don't get anything that comes across. And maybe it's because the weapons are too similar, but, like, I didn't get from... the machete is better than the club. But even there, it's like, is that such a huge factor that it's going to unquestionably decide this fight? You know, like...
Also, another reason that the person that prepared the test failed, forgot to mention, we noticed this watching, during the club test, the dummy is, like, taped together with Scotch tape.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God, I can't believe I forgot. The head is taped on.
Yeah. Was it, like, one they already used, or was it already falling apart?
That's during the club test and the machete test.
Taped.
Both tests, the head is taped on.
And my theory, like, whenever the club is, like, going to town, Dorian gives the boys a little smirk, like, I don't know what that's about. Like the club proved something that Dorian thought. I have a feeling he was like, I told you a dub take would work. I told you that it would stay on, stay together. That's what I think that smirk was.
It's so noticeable too. Like it's a clear packing
in the
tape.
light.
Yeah, my theory was that like they ran out of the full bodies, but they had like separate torsos and separate heads that they had in stock. So they were just like, well, let's just make do.
They hadn't got that season 4 renewal yet. Their budget's
maybe
running
if we
out.
go under budget, then they'll renew us for another season.
Yeah. So those were my thoughts. I thought the episode was a little sloppy, but it is carried in some respects. And yeah, the sweet note being, I don't think these two would fight each other in real life. They would probably be friends, or at least friends, maybe not the right word, but like allies. So yeah. Kudos to you, Mr. Villa.
All right, Mr. Lucas.
Yeah, I want to talk about one of my favorite things ever that just I do every episode. I get to the results. I write the results out in my notes, and I'm like, do I want to write my conclusion out, what I want to say at the end, sum it up? And I'm always like, nah, leave it blank. By the time we get to the end after discussing it, you'll come up with some like breakthrough, profound ending to what you feel about this episode, and I never do. So that being said, I'm kind of okay with these results. I didn't really know much about Pancho Villa going into this one, but the dude's really cool. He had this long life story of essentially being the underdog. He constantly was in charge of this revolutionary army. And as I mentioned before in his past, he had these allies that would rise up with him, and then they would kind of become corrupt. They would become part of that machine, and they would turn their back on these revolutionary armies. And he stayed true to the goal pretty much his whole life until he eventually had to retire. And he always kept, the previous guys that he was allies with, now they're on the bad team, and I got to raise a revolutionary army and try to take them down. And dude had, some losses, but he had a long streak of winning. So, I mean, if I had more time, I'd love to look more into him. Apparently he was doing something right on the battlefield if he was able to lead these revolutionary armies and take down federal armies, go in, raid United States bases, escape capture for a long time, escape jail. The dude has a really cool story. The snapshot that I guess we're getting with this episode is when he was the brigadier general of the federal army. So if that's the snapshot we're getting, I can see this whole, like, he's well supplied coming into play. That's when he had his trains. That's when he had his, like, maximum supplies, ammunition. But I really like the terminology that you used, Matt, that this episode is just kind of sloppy in its presentation. The experts are not good with the weapons. The weapens, there are differences between...
There's duct tape on the ballistic.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally sloppy. Like,
there are significant differences, in my opinion, from like the 73 model and the 94 model, but you don't see any of them on the show. The handguns are pretty similar, but I guess they're... I mean, if you... I don't know. I'm harping up a stupid tree, but if you brought in some like trained cowboy action shooters to represent the true differences between these weapons,
GWYs.
I mean, it would be better to see what these differences are, but as this episode is presented, yeah, they kind of come across as like extremely similar. And yeah, they just boil it down to this 30-second 15-second segment of X Factors is what determines this whole battle. And Pancho Villa versus Crazy Horses.
All right, you guys heard it here.
That's my final thoughts.
Throat goat.
Sleepy Lucas over here. Okay. Anyway, shouts out to Joe. All right, let's wrap it up there, boys. So probably one of our shorter episodes, although not for lack of trying.
I bet 2 hours 45 minutes.
Okay, we'll see once that's coming.
Brendan, what are we at?
2 hours 54.
Oh,
okay.
Take off my like pee break that you guys didn't get to see.
What pee break?
Ooh.
We'll see when the edit comes down. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. We have one more episode of Real Deadliest Warrior and not Dumbass Deadliest Warrior. So very excited to see how that unfolds. Watch an episode for the first time, basically, for me and Lucas, which is going to be awesome. Let us know what you think. As always, appreciate the comments. And nothing else.
I got one final point I just want to make. Matt, your Yeti mic kind of looks like a dick. It looks like you're going to give it a terrific blow in the corner of your screen there.
Well, I am the throat goat, so.
I'll go pay Terrifico. All right.
Oh, gift that. Everyone gift that.
I know that. This is a family show. All right. Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.